Welcome, everyone. It is May 18th, 2026. This is our 9 a.m. strategic planning meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. Please let the record reflect that in the conference room, we have Commissioner Waldriff and Kearns, and virtually we have Commissioner Brooks. I believe we will be joined in a few hours or about an hour and a half by Commissioner French, and Commissioner Jordan is out today. So we are going to lead off today with a presentation focused on the budget. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeff McMorris.
We're going to cover the 4 bullet points. We're going to take them in a different order than posted. So we're starting with in GAD on liability,
workers' comp.
Workers' comp, then liability. Liability is the big nut.
Yeah.
So when we get to that point, we will be looking for specific direction on what to put into our budgets, because we need that pattern in before we go out to really bad.
All right. Well, good morning. Thank you for your time. There's our slides there. So if we advance to the next slide, we're going to talk about workers' comp 5. There's just kind of a small statement down there below as we go into this that, our continued efforts holistically, the county does a great job trying to reduce workplace injuries. But there's a lot that's not in the county's control that are increasing and causing additional expenses. And part of that is just medical and wage inflation, right? We don't have any control over how costly it is to for somebody to go in and receive services, of course, our wage. And how does that play into, as far as the wage, how does that play into workers' comp? Well, if somebody has a time loss claim, right, we start paying that out of the workers' comp fund until they can go back to work. And so that affects, right, the higher wages, the more that comes out of those funds. So if we move down to the next slide, you'll see back in the end of 24, so this would have been for the 25 budget. This is kind of where we were trending, right? We were starting to trend in a downward. The green blocks that you see there, that's where we want to be for a 1 in 20 year event, right? The bottom part of that to the upper limit, we'd like to be in the middle. That's where the actuary is projecting our losses to be. So if everything started coming in, those would be the reserves that you would need to have in place. And currently that's estimated between, well, in 25 for 26 budget, that was estimated 4.8 million to 9.7 million on the high. And you can see the black line where we were kind of trending for $0.2 million loss. If we move on to the next slide, this is the projection for 27 budget. And remember, we're always 2 years behind, right? So this is the end of 25, projecting for 27. Again, we're starting to tip the wrong way. So our green blocks, the lower end for that is moved by a little over 1 million to 5.7, and the upper end to 11.3. And right now, if we continue in the trend that we're moving, we're projected at a $1.3 million loss if it were to start coming to fruition. So again, we don't have control over this. We've got, medical expenses that are creeping up there. It's not cheap anymore. We don't necessarily have increasing numbers in claims. Our claim levels stay pretty flat for the most part, but it is wage increases in just medical expenses that drive. If we go to the next slide, so again, this was 25, 26 projections. This was a year ago, projecting kind of where our losses might be, historical projected ultimate losses there. This is with a SIR, if you see at the top, of $1 million retention for law enforcement or police. So the first $1 million of any claim is all county dollars. And then everybody else falls under that $750,000 retention. So this was kind of just showing where our historical or projected ultimate losses would be. The trend is roughly a 7% annual growth. And again, most of that is due to growth in the wage and medical inflation, because we, for the most part, have stayed pretty flat over 10 years. You'll see in 23, if we go to the next, it'll be easier to see. If we go to the next slide, 23 and 25, you'll see, and then also 19, but that was COVID, you'll see those numbers were pretty high in our losses. But in 23, if you remember, we had an incident with a public works employee that was struck by a train. So that's why you see the increase in 23. And then, of course, in 25, we had the unfortunate incident with Sergeant Solis out on I-90. And so that drove those costs up in 25. The unfortunate thing is with those two losses, it is driving our rate up with the insurance companies. So we put that out to bid for 26. We had three of those come back. Our current provider, it was about a $200,000 or not a $200,000 raise from 181,000 to 196,000. That was the best we could get listing with our current, and that was moving from $1 million SIR to $1.5 million SIR for law enforcement, and from 750 to 850 for everybody else. When we put that out there, most of the bids came back either half more expensive or double. One of the bids came back at $400,000 to keep our SIR at 1.5 and 850. And that is just a trend, or just kind of, I guess, red flags to show you where the cost for insurance for workers' comp, as far as the excess insurance is starting to trend, is starting to be expensive. So we did see that 8.2% increase for 26 in our premiums. We are estimating another 8% increase in our premium, so that would drive it up to about 212,000 or 2007 or 27. If we move on to the next slide, the actuary always puts out, if you remember, they put out 3 funding options and how you can affect your fund balance. There's option 1, 2, and 3. And just remember, option 1 typically is we're not really changing anything. We're not adding any money at all. We're just trying to cover the expenses projected for the following year. Option 2, if you notice there, if it's a 10%, it would add about 278,000. And it's attacking that $1.2 million deficit that the actuary is projecting in losses. So you can kind of see how that would affect that. And of course, then option 3 is the 15%, which would reduce that deficit even further. Any questions on the workers' comp so far? It's not as volatile as liability. Of course, liability will be its own monster we'll get to in a little bit. Workers' comp tends to stay a little bit more level, right? We don't have, unless we have the unfortunate incidences like the train incident and the Sergeant Solis incident, we trend pretty flat for the most part. But we are seeing medical expenses starting to really go up. And of course, wages, as those go up, that really starts to affect the bottom line. The only thing I caution, and I know, we're all here and we're very aware of upcoming budget, is I just don't want to see workers' comp start to slide backwards and get into the liability issue. If we were to go too far with the workers' comp issue, the state could come in and take over. We do have reporting requirements to the state. And if they don't see solvency there, which there are additional funds that are set aside that we have nothing to do with, that the auditors maintain. So if the county, let's just say, were to go bankrupt, there are funds there to cover these current expenditures. And those are there by statute law. But if we trend too far backwards, it does open up the door for the state to come in and take over. And they monitor basically and make sure that you're actually funding your program correctly before they let go. And say, okay. Put that out there.
After the actuary presented, it was Ashley, Tim Donovan, the three of us and Dan's team. We settled on recommending the 5% increase on this one. Primarily because we felt we could handle a smaller increase here, knowing there's going to be the large increases needed with liability and medical. So kind of to balance the overall world of increases, that's why we landed on a 5% increase. In the world of actuaries, more would be better. That was where the consensus of our conversation went.
In advance to the next slide. It just shows basically what that 5% increase would be. It's an estimated, they're estimating 2027 cost to be for the whole program to be about $4.7 million. A 5% would inject just under 50,000, moving the total contributions to 4.8. And then it just shows the rates there. And just so I guess just clarity on how the rates work, those are based on worker hours, right? So every department is reporting their worker hours and we charge based on that. I have to estimate every year what the worker hours will be for our insurance. And then that is audited based off of what what we produced at LNI. The insurance looks at that. In years past, those numbers were inflated, which would cause basically for budget purposes, if you look at it, if you inflate those numbers, it looks like you're going to get a lot more money than you actually do, because if you're inflating your projected worker hours and you come under that, you are not bringing as much into the program. I have tightened that up to within a few $100 within the audit. Before they were $10,000+ in the positive or overestimating. So we've cleaned that up pretty tight. So for the most part, these would be pretty actual numbers. Again, it is all based on worker hours. So if worker hours increase, there's a little bit more that comes to workers' comp. If worker hours are down, then that drops that. So it is somewhat fluid in that sense.
So this is one we are hoping to get some direction on. If you like the 5% or if you would like a different number.
I'm comfortable with you guys moving forward at 5. If that's what you think is safe and prudent at this point. Commissioner Brooks, any thoughts?
I agree with the 5% at this point, but I think these are the things that as we look at the overall budget, we need to be looking at holistically, not isolating each thing. And I know, Jeff, you're trying to look at it holistically for us, but I think this is, part of as we start to make these decisions, we've got to be, understanding how one affects the other. And then my other question is this part of what gets billed out then to each department based on their share of workman's comp?
Yeah, it's billed out through their worker hours reported back. So
okay.
It's all based off worker hours.
So it's like, as we increase this, I just want everyone to understand then we're increasing the portion to each department that they're having to pick up as we ask them to try to cut costs. So
we are adding to their required expenses.
Yes, so I just want us as board members to understand that as we are moving forward.
In this instance, we play the role of the state, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
You are sending
Yes.
unfunded mandates to your departments tonight.
We are.
Yeah.
Finally, you're in the seat.
I mean, I'm concerned that we probably need to fund it more, but I'm assuming that there are some other priorities as well, so
Well,
we're gonna have,
liability
to
is
your
coming
point,
up
we're gonna
next.
have to balance them, so.
Got it.
Maybe after, I mean,
And you guys can come revisit it after you see the liability.
yes,
But
that's,
that one is a very large number.
Yeah.
And just for the record, I see we have been joined by Commissioner French.
We love
Okay.
liability.
Alright. So we will advance that slide and move on to property and liability. And that is one thing to just remember, property is tied into the liability fund, so they're two in one on there. But the nice thing with property is a very level, is not volatile property. To get property insurance in the state of Washington, for the most part, there's still a lot of competition out there amongst the insurance companies, so it doesn't move a whole lot. Again, just a disclaimer there, again, with all the efforts that the county does to continue to reduce risk as a whole, we are grappling with the perfect storm, and we've kind of talked to that in different meetings. Liability and property costs continue to rise. Jury awards, increasing jury awards, and these nuclear verdicts that go out are driving these costs, making especially liability insurance carriers nervous. And so they're seeing those go up. High litigation costs, and then property replacement costs are not cheap. And the only thing I would speak to that is similar to the Avista Stadium. We're replacing that. The nice thing with that is that is a $25,000 deductible on our end, for a $4+ million project. So that's nice, but it is expensive. Moving into the first slide. So this is what we showed you a year ago for. Go ahead and advance to the next slide. This is what we showed you a year ago for 2025. Again, the green is, for the lack of better sense, our reserves and where the actuary is suggesting we should be for the reserves. So you have the upper bound and lower bound, and that's for, again, a 1 in 20-year event that could be occurring. And we were trending downwards pretty heavy. Last year, if you remember, we did a 49% increase. And that 49% increase was basically to say we're just covering the costs projected for 2026, right? It wasn't adding to the fund balance, it wasn't moving it, it wasn't trying to get rid of the deficit, it was just trying to hold it still. Okay? If we move to the following, or the next slide, this is the end of 25. So this is the projection. This is where we landed at the end of 25. And you can see there's a huge jump in that green box or reserves. And what is driving this, as we've talked a lot, is the SAM claims. The SAM claims are putting a huge cloud, really skewing the exposure. And so right now we're trending at roughly a $12.3 million deficit. We are trending downwards, but that has to do with the continued exposure primarily into these SAM claims. If we move on to the next slide, again, this just looks at future payments or losses. For the most part, as you can see, we're pretty level across there. We've had a couple expenditures in 22 and in 24 as far as paying out some liability. building losses. But again, this is, these are older accidents, things that are out there, IBNR incurred but not yet reported, right? So the actuary takes that into effect. Consideration. We move on to the following slide. We actually ended pretty well in 25, right? The actuary had us estimated to have higher losses in 25. We actually trended quite a bit lower, almost $1 million less in losses in 25, which is great. But if you look at 26 and 27, they are spiking because again of sand claims. And as you know, we have increased those by 100% since 25, and that's why you're seeing these numbers starting to spike. Any questions on those? Okay. If we move, yes, sir.
Dan, can I ask, as you look back historically, I mean, you see 16, 17, 18, 19, and then a drop in 20 and 21. You saw an up in 22, but it did drop in 23. What are things that, I mean, what actions can we take as a county that can help us in the out years from here? I mean, because, I mean, historically, it does sometimes go down.
Right.
But I mean, I mean, they look sort of statewide, right? And sort
Yeah.
of trend, it's not just us, but
No, this
is there anything that we can do that helps bring our costs down? In the future?
you know, for the
Other
most
than
part,
putting more money in upfront.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
But
For the most part, a lot of it has to do with the economy. And
Okay.
again, something we don't have control over. When the economy is doing well, people are doing well, there's a lot less claims that roll in, right? People aren't looking for reimbursement because of driving costs of just in general, right? Some of these you think about, these are pothole claims and different things that, you know, to go replace a tire might be a couple $100. And if your, you know, economy's good, that's not a big deal. But if you're, you know, having a hard time putting gas in your car and you blow out a tire, I want the county to pay for it. So there is a lot of driving factor to how the economy affects claims, right? We are starting to also see just in general, the dollar amount, the value of claims going up. You know, you can see, like you said, 21, 22, 23, we weren't getting nuclear verdicts, except in Thurman, we got all of a sudden a nuclear verdict, right? And that kind of in general started kicking off these nuclear verdicts throughout the state. And so just the value of a claim is starting to go through the roof, where we could, you know, potentially mediate and get rid of a claim for $100,000 today. That's a $300,000 to $500,000 expense. So it's mostly driven by the dollar value of the claim. The nuclear verdicts that are going out are driving the actuary to say, hey, the value of your claims that we're projecting are starting to get real expensive.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily anything the county is doing wrong, right? It's just the state needs to step in and help out counties and entities in general, like tort reform, those types of things, putting some caps on things, limits. Right now, it's literally the sky's the limit.
Okay. Commissioner French?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I just wanted to share that tort reform is one of the priorities for LSC for the upcoming year. And so we're going to push that a little bit harder. This is, as Dan indicated, this is something that's more statewide. We're seeing decisions out of the courts that are, from my standpoint, usurious and just financially bankrupting counties and stuff. So it is going to be a priority for our next legislative session. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I know that's the same, WASAC, you know, they're going after that. The risk pool is also pushing, you know, for tort reform. So it is something that I guess maybe if the state gets stung enough, they'll step in and say, we gotta do something to assist us, so. So if we move on to the next slide, these are the actual 4 options. The actuary gave us 3, and then in our discussions, we asked for a 3rd option, which was 35%. And again, option 1, you're just funding at the current levels, you're not changing anything. And it would show that we would contribute an actual deficit into about $4.1 million if we were not to change our current funding strategies. Option 2, where you see the 0, that is we're just funding what the actuary believes our expenses are going to be for 27, and we're hopefully not adding to the deficit or the loss in there. Option 3 is the one that we all came up with collectively, which is a 35% increase that would add roughly $1 million towards that $12 million deficit that it's showing right now. So it's not moving the pendulum a whole lot, but at least we're not going backwards. And then option 4, which is crazy, 113%. But that 113% basically gets us to the $0 mark where we are no longer in the basement, but we're just sitting at 0. So that would be funding the current projected deficit of 12.4.
So they originally had options 1, 2, and 4. Same group I mentioned before. Ashley, Tim Donovan, us, and Dan's team. Kind of collectively came up, we thought we should do a little bit more than 28%, especially knowing the risk pool. We are the big fish in the risk pool. And at some point, the other counties might invite us to go out on our own. If that were ever the case, and it's something that is talked about, we need to be beefing up our balance. We also thought it'd be good to at least chip away. We know all of our outstanding claims are going to come in the same year. The likelihood of that is extremely low, but at least we'd be moving in the right direction. The 35% level does equate at $5.1 million countywide. About just over 4 million of that would be general. Because of the size of this one, that we're recommending to refer back to the other one, that's why we went smaller on the workers' comp. Thinking this one needed to go bigger.
If you advance to the next slide, this just shows you the option 3 at the 35%. Estimated costs. And that's, insurance cost, all of that. Just speaking to our liability insurance and our property insurance last year, or for this year, we increased our SIR for property from 25 to 50,000. And we saw a decent reduction in our property premium, which was great. But our liability, overall, we saw a 32% increase in our property and liability, but property went down, but liability is the one that, is skyrocketing. So again, this is really being driven by the insurance, and they're concerned, right? Especially with these SAM claims out there. They are very, very concerned. Yeah, I wish I could tell you, I'm looking forward to the day I get to come in here and say, we don't need an increase. We're doing good. Our reserves are where they need to be, and we can weather. But right now it's just going backwards. So.
And to pour a little salt in the wound. You guys all have this form in your packet. It shows the liability per department. The way the actuary breaks that out, that's not our work, that's the actuary's work. It will show last year's increase. And if you, just to remind you, last year, general fund balances paid for all of these increase rates. We increased by 49% last year. So if you look at any of these departments, roughly a third of that was paid for by fund balance. And so that also would have to be an unfunded mandate we're passing down to departments this year. They're gonna have to add last year's increase to their expenditures and cover it somehow. With this 35% on top of that. So it'll have a significant impact on the offices. The board could choose to do what we did last year and fund again from fund balance, but if we're in the habit of that, we're just to put bookends on the table. That is an option.
Commissioner Brooks.
Yeah, so one of the questions I think, Jeff, would be helpful for us is as we're looking at these, you know, and trying to figure it out as we're going to put this on departments, is kind of a spreadsheet that's going to show how much we're adding because of liability purposes, how much because of medical, you know, all those things that are going to be then pushed on the departments. I think just so we understand what the cost to each department is going to be. It'd just be good to have some estimates as we're looking at this, you know, because, you know, we need to do it. And as Commissioner French said, you know, WASAC is definitely looking at tort reform. But my understanding is the state put $1 billion into their set aside for tort cases instead of passing a bill. So hopefully, yes, we can get a bill passed on tort reform from the legislature, as they are seeing the costs as well. But I think for us to actually understand what we're now asking our departments to do, that it's not just this decision, but how it does affect all of them. I think it'd be good for us to see kind of a spreadsheet on that for us.
We'll put that together. What would you have in your packet alludes to that. It's not directly that, so we can create that spreadsheet as you suggested with all three. So you'd see exactly what the increase would be in the upcoming budget.
So if you advance the slide. These two, both this one and the next one, these are directly from the actuary. What Jeff was alluding to is a little further down in the packet, which kind of cleans this up. It takes the actuary numbers, which they're, you know, they look at office space. Do you have vehicles? How many claims you've had? I mean, that's what the actuary these are looking at. The one thing I can tell you on this sheet and the next one, if you look at column 11 is basically projecting what each department would be adding to hammer away at reducing that deficit. That's what column 11 is referring to. So column 9 is, here's what the cost is associated for projected for 27 for all the departments. Column 11 is, here's what they're adding to try and reduce that current $12.2 million deficit. So it's what they're throwing in. And we can always provide the actuary to anybody who wants to see it. I know these are a little hard to read, but I wanted to take them directly from the actuary.
The final column though, column 12, the allocated program costs. I mean, that's, so I assume that there's several factors that go into that, number of employees. I mean, is there like actual kind of danger of the position?
You drive your cars, like
Yeah.
the commissioners, you all drive cars.
I mean, see, that's what I was putting. It's like $211,000 for the commissioner's office. It's like, have we ever had a claim?
Had a couple.
I've never filed one.
But this is just the, I mean, this
Haven't
is,
filed against me that I'm aware of. It's like, that just seems like a huge number.
it's also office space. It's your footprint that the commissioners are using in the building. Because again, you have to realize this is also property, right?
Mhm.
This number is tied into what property insurance,
Yeah.
you know, is. So it's just the overall property and liability, if you can remember the two, but liability is the one that's driving this.
Yeah.
A lot harder than liability or property is. So.
Okay.
But it does take all of that into consideration, so. And even some of the departments last year that split, you know, and they're kind of their two own entities, or like taking on solid waste, right? That's a new increase because that used to be contracted out, so we could, you know, move our liability cost off to them, right? Our exposure was covered by them, but when we take that on, we take on all of that additional liability. So it does drive these numbers up. As the county grows, you know, we buy more property, we build more buildings. It just drives these numbers. The last slide that I have is just if you want to advance, it's the funding options 5-year history. So go ahead and advance again. And this is just a recap of what the county has decided as far as what the actuaries options were, option 2 and option 3. I didn't put 1 on there because 1 is usually not a good thing because you're just adding to the deficit, but these are the percent increases over the years. So you can see that option 2, that's a $0 to the fund balance. Option 3 usually increases the fund balance. So you're attacking that. We're adding to it. And then that last column is what the county actually implemented based on the recommendations from the actuary. So you can see we're a little light in some years where the actuary was saying, hey, we've got kind of an issue here. You want to attack this. Any questions on that? I believe the sheet that Jeff was talking about is 2 more slides away, but that concludes what I have to tell you. Fortunately.
So to put together the spreadsheet that Commissioner Brooks recommended, he wants to stick with the 5 and 35. Or something different or in addition to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
That's where we should.
when I look at it, just a quick once over for each department, a lot of them is doubling from 2025.
Yeah, it'll be significant.
So for instance, like juvenile detention, it's almost double, 300,000 additional dollars that we have to identify.
And we could also put the current 12% medical to round out the picture overall.
But yeah, I agree with Commissioner Brooks to have, you need to lay it out and explain each area to each of the departments, yeah. So I see that, so you have some sort of calculation for each department based on that higher level of risk. Some of them it's much more than others, just depending on the risk involved.
The actuary actually did that.
Okay, so that's all based on a formula.
Yeah.
Like scraps is a lot higher than a normal department.
Correct.
Which makes sense.
Yes.
We had a bad fight a few years ago.
We had a couple.
There's just more risk involved in the work.
Correct. And it does, yeah, it takes that in there. Then, like I said, that column 11 tries to show, you know, based on their exposure, the work that they're doing for the county, what that exposure is, what that increase would be to attack the deficit. It's proportionate to their actual exposure to.
So we'll bring back the spreadsheet to the next meeting.
And again, this is just feedback from the commissioners. It's placeholders into the budget. You don't adopt the budget until the beginning of December. These are levers that you can pull. It's just having something in right now for the baseline assumptions are helpful, then we can evaluate how that rolls up into the overall budget as the departments are starting to inform on their submissions.
I think it's a good idea, at least progressing forward, being the 5 and 35 at this point as we move forward, and hopefully those hold if we have to adjust as process continues, but I think for now, you can put those in as placeholders. For all the good news, Dan.
Start on Monday.
I am looking forward to the day to walk in here and say, we're good, we're good.
We are too.
And then, Mr. Vice Chair, if you'd allow a short miscellaneous of Auditor Dalton
Sure.
here, who does relate to the budget.
If it costs money, the answer is no.
She might save us money.
Okay, Nikki, welcome.
We've
Might make a lot of people unhappy,
Yeah.
but, yeah.
We are having trouble with some employees reconciling the business cards and the travel cards. To the point we have hundreds of transactions, more than a year old. We can't even, we're trying to close out books per our policy. Under, I believe, the auditor's authority. We are allowed to remove cards. Cards are a privilege, not a right. In my opinion, you can still do whatever you want to do, just put on your personal card and get reimbursed. You'll probably care more, so you'll get the receipts and get reimbursed. And if you don't, no skin off our nose, the candidate doesn't have to pay for it. There's a little bit of money savings maybe. And so that's the nuts and bolts.
Sure. So yeah, this came up because I was assisting someone with their travel, and as we were doing research. We found that there were some old charges that hadn't been cleared. So in talking with purchasing, because purchasing actually manages the travel cards and the P cards. Heather ran some stats. We still have 6 outstanding transactions from 2024. 51 from 2025. And for the first quarter of this year, there's 332 transactions that still have not been reconciled.
So are these ones that people made on a county card and
Mhm.
just have not submitted the receipt? You know,
Correct.
haven't, are some of these where maybe they've submitted, but it's been kicked back for more information, or are these just they swiped the card and
These haven't
didn't?
even started.
Okay,
Yes.
And some of them, we've been aware of, court.
so 24.
Yeah.
It's not gonna, they probably don't have the receipt anymore, nothing's gonna come of that.
But we need to finish the process.
Yeah, so how do you,
Yeah.
yeah.
And we would have to work with each one of these individuals.
okay,
But yeah, and it's not like people don't know. Courtney sends out reports every month. Saying, here's the transactions that have not been, it's called reconciled, so they
Yeah.
haven't even been pulled in. From the department to start working on them. And what that means is we have expenditures that haven't been recorded against their budget. We have, any of this is from grants, then the grant hasn't been billed for it. So, what started out as just a small issue has brought like there's a much bigger problem. And it's countywide, it's not one individual, it's very broad. So we're finding that this is an item that needs to be dealt with, but what it does mean is people's travel cards and potentially their purchase cards will be canceled if they don't follow the rules.
so,
The authority is already there.
Yeah.
okay, well, I would just say, how would you,
How many call you guys to
Yeah.
complain? We want to know.
Yeah. It's already, the travel policy already has the Senate. The P card policy already has the Senate, so the authority's already been delegated from the board.
Can you remind us, is it one instance you lose your card? Is it a warning and then you lose your card?
it's
Did it
up
happen
to-
the second time? What do you
It's
think?
Up to the discretion of purchasing director.
Okay.
Is how it's written.
All right.
But what we're talking about is picking, a couple of dates to say if you're more than 3 months out, then we're gonna cancel your card.
Okay.
And then we're gonna pick a go forward date, probably either the end of June or the middle of July, to say if you don't have these cleaned up, anything that's March 30th or older, then your card goes. There has to be consequences to people
Yeah.
not performing their responsibilities. This is what it is. Having either a P card or a county travel card is a responsibility.
Oh, yeah. And each of these people know that this is an instance that involves them, right? They know they have something that's out there that hasn't been reconciled. We're not gonna have people that say, they shut off my card, I had no idea I had an outstanding purchase, like, they
We'll do a
know,
lot of work to
right?
communicate that,
Yes.
We'll do communication, but they did make the purchase.
Yes.
So
yeah.
at some point,
Well,
And some of the travelers have someone else who does their expense report for them. So the traveler may not know
okay,
that their expenditures have not been recorded. So in all fairness to the traveler, they may not know.
okay.
But that's where the person who's doing the expense report for the traveler also needs to communicate back to the traveler. So again, you take on the role, you take on the responsibility.
Alright.
And again, it's not one person, this is across the county where we have issues.
Commissioner Brooks.
Yeah, so a couple of questions I have on that is like, are some of them just frequent flyers that we know and we need to target? And I'm okay with, trying to get this handled. But the other question I have, so two questions, that, and then when we do conferences and that kind of thing, I know we have to put in so far in, like a long ways in advance, and we're not getting reimbursed until we actually complete the travel. So how does that work? I mean, is that part of what you're seeing? I guess that's what I just want to make sure we're not penalizing people that are trying to get their conferences on the early bird special, and then we're gonna, hold them up.
You can submit more than one expense report per trip. So if you buy your airfare 3 months in advance, you go ahead and submit an expense report with that airfare. And then if you've had to book your hotel room and they required a deposit, again, you can put that on an expense report and submit the expense report. So you're not limited to one expense report per trip. You have to do the spend authorization, which is the approval to do the trip. And then if you need to do 3 or 4 expense reports to finish that trip, then you can do that. We do prefer to try to consolidate it as much as possible. But
I would say that.
you can do more than one expense.
And the scenario you put forward, Commissioner Brooks, isn't the primary culprit. Cause we do look at that sort of thing and understand if somebody's waiting to the end. Like the example I know Courtney's been working with, it's a trip that was taken in April of 25. And she has probably asked 10 times for the data. Until I went and had a stern conversation, we couldn't even get the name of the traveler. It's
Yeah.
departments just not caring because it doesn't impact their budget. If it never gets billed against their budget, they actually have more money to spend. And
Yeah,
so-
no, I get that. So, I mean, I'm in favor of trying to do something to make sure people are putting it in on time. I just know that, travel for conferences and different things can kind of be a pain. So
Yeah.
just wanting to make sure of that. And then, like I said, just seeing, is it certain business managers in departments that are not putting stuff through?
I would say
or
the
is it-
80-20 rule holds true, yes. 20% of the people cause 80% of the problem.
Because I'm happy to as well go talk to them with you, Jeff, because sometimes it helps to have a commissioner finally just say, okay, if this is what you're going to do, then I'm going to reserve so much of your budget, and it's going to be reserved until you pay it or turn in all the receipts. I don't know. That could be another option.
The quiver in the. Arrow in the quiver.
Yeah.
So is there no way to require or resolve? Why aren't we resolving this at the end of each year? Cause it just requires,
Cause you have to give us the receipts.
okay,
Unless we come pilfer your office and purse, how do we get them?
I'm
Yes.
surprised that Anyway, maybe I'm not surprised, but no,
Yeah,
I
don't be surprised,
yeah,
because we can't do it. Jeff can't do it, Tess can't do it, I can't do it, Courtney can't do it.
right, you
The
have to.
traveler
yeah.
has to fulfill their responsibilities. They have to get the receipt, they have to provide the receipt, they have to, or their worker has to file the expense report. We cannot do that. That's why we're here.
Yeah,
Is because
and you get
People are
reminders,
not
the system
doing what
keeps
they
popping
need to do.
back to you to say, you have this expense that you need to file. So there's no reason that you forgot about it. Although I'm wondering if it's in a previous year, does it keep sending you need to file this expense report, so then.
Yep, it stays out there as, don't forget you have this item.
But like,
Yeah, I
like
mean, at a
they
certain,
said, if it doesn't hit their budget, people don't
yeah, what's the,
necessarily
so that's-
take the initiative or care,
so
so.
I guess the stick
The stick
that
would
we
be
have
removal of
is
the
to
card.
remove the
Yeah.
card and then you have to pay and get reimbursed with your own card.
Commissioner Brooks?
Fine with,
Yeah, that's kind of, I guess, one of my questions is, and Vicky, you know, in the past, we had people that were trying to really push P cards and travel cards and all of that. And so do we want, I mean, I know we've tried to pull back on some of the P cards. Do we want to pull back on travel as well? I mean, because, you know, like for myself, I don't have a problem putting it on my personal card and then, you know, seeking reimbursement, but there's some people don't like that, but some people, you know, they wanted to, or I thought in the past we were told we needed to have the county travel card because they didn't want us using our personal cards. So I guess I'm just trying to clarify as we move forward with this, like what do we really want that to be?
I think that's a discussion that the board, along with department heads and the elected officials, need to have. One of the theories for using the travel card, and then this is previous administrations ago, was to get a rebate. And that was a big push for the procurement cards, the travel cards, was to get a rebate back to the county. I'm not sure that that's much of a dollar amount anymore. So one of the main reasons for having done this may be gone. The other issue for having travel cards, not necessarily for every single is that there are employees out there who don't have enough money to be able to fund the trip in advance. And although it is a little bit of a pain, you could have one travel card in a department that could be used for things like airfare. And that person who has the card can then assign the expense to the traveler. So there is a process that we can do in this system to move the details where they need to go. So we could start reducing the number of travel cards out there, which would probably make the people who are administering the travel cards
Right.
really happy to reduce just the volume that's out there on travel cards. But I think it's a discussion that needs to be had with the board and with the department heads so that everybody in management understands the impact and the consequences and also how these travel cards should.
So it varies by department. Some departments, if they hire a person, they put in for their cards. It's just, that's their culture. I know.
Right, no, but I think with Workday, I mean, I think understanding the new system and how this works, it is kind of I think it is worthy of a bigger discussion to say, what do we really want this to do? Because I know I'm, you know, confused on how it really works with Workday. I'm sure Brendan knows better than I, but, you know, having obviously been in a chief deputy auditor, understand from what it used to be in PeopleSoft that, you know, was not always easy as people are trying to put in some of the expenses when you're stacking them and paying in upfront and all that. So I think having a bigger discussion with, like you're saying, Vicky, with the department heads and elected officials to figure out what do we think the most efficient system today is, and start doing that, whether it's, and yes, I know some people can't, you know, they don't have a credit card to put, you know, or a limit, you know, enough ability to use it that way. And so we need to provide that. But I think, yeah, having a whole discussion on this would probably be a good thing to figure out what's going to be the best way moving forward with Workday and how things are processing now.
We
That-
do have it
that would
queued
be
up for
appreciated.
tomorrow for the elected official department head meeting. Pending your guys's feedback today, which seems to be moved forward. We will have a first conversation.
Are these primarily travel? Or is it someone went to something downtown, used a card for parking downtown and, you know, it's a couple bucks or for parking, or is it hundreds for airline tickets and thousands when you tack on airfare, hotel, multiple time? I mean, are they small dollar amount things, big
It's-
dollar amount, or a mixture of everything?
Mixture of everything,
Okay.
so we're sitting at about 130. 131,000.
Okay.
As of Friday. It's March 30th or older.
Scott?
If memory serves me, about a year ago or so, we proactively canceled a bunch of travel cards. We gave the department's directions, no longer automatically issue a travel card for every employee that comes in, because many and most of them will not travel. So we greatly reduced travel cards. I think we did something similar with purchasing cards. And so we've already made that.
That was like 2 years ago,
adjustment.
right?
Yeah, I think so. As far as the timeline goes, I think it's completely reasonable that at most, 90 days, you have 90 days to submit and reconcile your travel card. And if you don't, it'll be automatically suspended and subject to cancellation. So if our policy right now says at the discretion of, I would recommend having it be definitive in there. It says, this is the policy. You don't have within 90 days. And if we have to take a next step as to, if you still don't submit it, perhaps that's a payroll reconciliation that we have to look at. So
That will be a legal issue.
I understand. That's why I said
Yeah.
perhaps.
Yeah.
But I don't think keeping
We'll
it
just-
open-ended is serving anyone any benefits here, having it be very definitive.
Yeah, we've had that discussion about recovery from employee. We've never found a way to make it happen.
Travel cards.
It's payroll.
Or
With-
you don't get to travel
You don't
anymore.
get trouble. And quite honestly,
I mean,
with-
whether you put it on your own card or not, no, you don't travel. The county will not pay for you to travel in the future. How about that?
and honestly, with the way the budget is right now, there's.
shouldn't. I mean, we
going to
need
be
to clamp down on
significantly less
travel.
Travel,
Big
conferences,
time.
training has to be.
Yeah, which was supposed to be a main focus this year. Travel was supposed to be greatly reduced and everything I'm hearing is, I don't think that's happening. I think some people are traveling more in 26 than they did in 25. So, another issue, maybe we'll get there later today.
We'll get to that issue.
That's great.
Not on today's agenda.
Okay. Well, I support you in that. I think that's a great idea of canceling cards. If people aren't gonna follow the rules and they're not gonna do what is in the agreement when they get the card, then I think we gotta take their cards away.
We will go forth and do so.
I mean, and that's me. I mean, anybody, I don't know if anybody else disagrees, but that's where I'm at.
I mean, it's a liability, financial liability. And it's causing extra work for employees to constantly
Mind.
remind people. And I just think that I think it's very reasonable to
Yes.
to have a time frame of like 3 to 4 months to initiate your reimbursement, either the reimbursement or I guess we're talking about one of the expense paperwork. Very reasonable.
I think Amber hit it there with reasonable, and I think
Yes.
any reasonable person will see it this way, that this is not controversial, I don't think. If you can't, I mean, if you're gonna use the card, you gotta turn in a receipt, you gotta get it reconciled, get it taken care of, I mean, that shouldn't be a problem. So,
We appreciate the support. Hopefully we can, in the next few months, give this more.
Yeah.
All right, we'll go quickly through budget amendments. Try to do this speed round. Ron should have this in the packet. Several of these budget amendments are related to 2025 books, closing things out as the auditor's office has worked through financial statement prep. These will go for preliminary public hearing next week and final public hearing June 9th. So I'll be back to brief on June 9th at your 2 p.m. consent agenda. So starting in the general fund, we had additional sales tax revenue in 2025 to the tune of $1.something million. That was utilized for various agencies that ran short on payroll in most cases, economic development and outside agencies. There were accounting adjustments, timing of accounting with accruals switching into Workday last year that caused some unintended budget consequences. So this is just right sizing those budgets. The next two are related to different sheriff doof fees. The first is a DEA doof fee. They purchased a vehicle. The second is the canine doof fee balance, purchased 2 additional canines. Next page, we have some additional revenue that came in for Parks Department to support Centennial Trail maintenance in the year 2025. Item number 5 up there is animal control. That looks like a scary number. It is simply an accounting entry that needed to happen when we refunded and refinanced our bonds that support the animal control facility. There was also a very similar entry that you'll see in the other funds for, I believe, solid waste. Detention services needed fund balance to the tune of $440,000 to support the settlement of the union contract that impacted 2025's books. Items 7 through 10 are all present day. So we are appropriating fund balance for internal services to support Workday support contracts. We are appropriating fund balance for the Law and Justice Department to support the essential facility siting process. Appropriating fund balance in non-departmental for the small arms turn lane. That is to get purchasing to start the project, and we hope it will come in costing less. We're also going to see what the cost estimates and timing are, and hopefully get that project done this year. If not, we'll push it to the beginning of next year. And the last item there for non-departmental is $690,000 of fund balance to support unanticipated legal bills. Going into the other funds, we have again 2025 accounting or budget adjustments for most of these. This was hotel motel additional revenue, or excuse me, fund balance to support Plants Ferry improvements that had already been contemplated by the board. Just cleaning up the accounting there. Next page, Ron, number 12, Housing Trust Fund, $920,000 of fund balance. A project was expensed in 2025. We'd anticipated in 26, but it was able to be expensed earlier, so we just had to adjust that for Fund 123. The medical insurance fund, we had to dig into our fund balance to the tune of just over $5 million to support higher than budgeted claims. The TPA fund, we had additional revenue that came in higher than we'd budgeted and planned, and that money just goes straight out to pay for Visit Spokane and Spokane Sports. Number 15, debt service fund, we needed to appropriate revenue, a transfer in to pay for some debt from hotel motel tax. The county capital improvement funds, that was the bond issue we did in December to pay for campus infrastructure improvement expenses. Item 17, solid waste, that is the counterpart to the scraps, again related to the bond issue we did in December, $2.8 million to support just accounting entries. Item 18, we had some additional revenue from 911 tax. We needed to appropriate to deal with some prepaid expenses in that budget. Item number 19, the dental insurance fund needed $5,000 in fund balance to pay for, I believe it was payroll accruals. And then item 20, the last page there, Ron, purchase order roll forwards for various funds and departments going from 2025 to 2026. Most of these are small. We have the internal services, which is related to primarily to our liability that we set aside last year for this year's planned increase out of the general fund to pay for all those departments. And then non-departmental, that looks like a very large, scary amount. It is a continuation of all of the ARP contracts that we moved to the general fund. That is multiple millions, as well as $2.1 million for the county's ongoing contributions to the Avista Stadium remodel. We'd originally set aside $8 million, and we've just kind of been spending down over the last few years and expect to spend the rest of that this year. Any questions?
Oh, Commissioner Brooks.
Yeah, a couple questions I have. So one of them's on the workday. I thought we were doing like, it was just over 200,000. So just remind me, because I thought part of that was coming from savings that we had in some of the areas, but I don't know, I could be off on that. So I just wanted to ask about that. And then the other one was the 5 million. What was that one?
The 5 million is for the medical insurance fund.
Okay, so that's, again, just, I mean, I apologize if we talked about it and I just don't remember, but so we're already 5 million over from last year, and that's why we're anticipating even more this year.
Yeah, I think the 5 million was we didn't have enough expense budget appropriated when we started the year, and claims came in higher. I would say that I think Tim Donovan has been helping us review that fund, and I know he was kind of actively working it for how much revenue was a contribution to that fund, but this is very much a function of the expense appropriation and authority that we had within the fund was not sufficient to pay all of the bills that needed to come out of that fund last year.
Okay, and so as we look at, how does that affect us as we look at this year then? Because I mean, obviously I didn't recollect that we were 5 million under in the expense, you know, in funding our medical. I thought we had enough fund balance in our medical, but that's why I'm just trying to make the connection there, because we purposely put more money into our
This is medical fund balance funds. It's creating more expenditure authority with them.
And so we'll bring a picture. I hear how you're trying to reconcile it, Commissioner Brooks. We'll bring a picture of the last few years of contributions to the fund, as well as what the adopted authority was, and then if we've made any adjustments for claims at the end of the year, and try to draw kind of a couple-year picture for you, as well as what we're forecasting for the next few years.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
And then on the workday question, we do anticipate that we'll have other funds to cover one of those contracts, but it likely is going to be a transfer in, and so we still need the expenditure authority within the internal services budget to make that expense, to pay that contract out. So it's more a function of where we have budget living to clean things up for us, but that's where we're at.
Okay, thank you.
Could I just get clarity on, so it's a total of just over 2 million that we're funding to these different departments, right? At the top, various
The first and
agencies.
page one, yes, yep.
And you said about 1 million of that was the 2025 overage of sales tax.
That whole 2.1 million was additional sales tax revenue that we received last year,
Okay, I
Higher
thought
than
you said
we
it was a little over 1 million, but it was a little over 2 million.
2 million.
Okay.
Oh,
got it.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, that's.
I-
think
I
I
think-
misspoke both.
My apologies.
And I was like, where'd the other million come from?
I figured we
Okay.
were funding the missing million from fund balance.
Okay.
Okay,
Nope,
so
my-
it is all
it
covered
was
in that.
2.1.
Okay,
Okay.
great, great.
So basically, you're taking the total amount of sales tax that was over what we budgeted,
To cover.
putting it to all these categories in the general fund. And then the other funds are all coming.
From their
Right.
own sources.
All of it's fund balance. Yeah.
And that is. So for instance, like the dental insurance, it's coming from that fund,
Correct.
and you're just moving it to pay for those.
Yep.
Additional expenses,
Creating additional spend authority within the fund.
but the fund already had the.
Has
dollars
the money, it's all
Got it.
saved there, yep.
That's the same with the 5 million medical
That
fund.
that Commissioner Brooks was mentioning, okay, got it, thank you.
In these areas that have enough expense.
Alright.
Any other questions on that before we move to the next sheet?
We're good.
So the next one we're gonna look at is the Spokane County General Fund. Gus is passing them out. We're now to pay period 9. You'll see a little 9 in the top right hand corner. Just to remind you, we are moving this chart to by pay period, so we no longer have 2 pay periods a month. We have pay periods every 2 weeks. This is a roll up of the form that we showed all departments how to use. Commissioner CUNY hosted a meeting for departments. We held it in the VOCC chambers across the way. Very well attended meeting. We've had positive feedback. Not positive on our budget situation, but positive on how to grab the data, see it, see the data as presented to the board from the budget department. Fairly self-explanatory. Those in red are in a deficit year to date. There are some there's reasoning behind, facilities. They just had a retirement, they're not backfilling. So they had budgeted in a way that they would be in the red right now, but it will work out in a year. So not all of them are as dire as they look. And then one thing, we also ran percentage of budget on some of them. The detention services is a fairly big number. It's 0.5% of their budget that they're over. Compared to DEM, which is a smaller number, but it's almost 15% of their budget. So don't always just look at the raw number. A comparative analysis to the first column, which is the full budget, is another way to look at it. Our question for you as a board is, what do you want us to do with this data? There's obviously some departments that stick out here. Do you want to have mid-year conversations? Do you want us to invite in some of the departments that are over in a significant way that we can't see where they're going to self-resolve?
I think we have to bring them in. I don't think we can push this off and look at it in September or something when we're 3/4 through. I mean, I think we need to jump on it as early as possible.
And we 5 months into the year right now.
Yeah, I don't think we can just have the conversation with those of us around this table. I think we need to bring in the folks from this department, and at least ask them what's happening. I mean, there could be a thing where they have a lot of expenses at the beginning of the year, second half of the year, those expenses trail off and they're gonna come in under budget. But if they're not, if they're gonna continue this accelerated expense, I think we need to get them in here as quick as possible and figure out why and see if we can slow it down.
And this is salaries and benefits only, so it's not
Okay.
the entirety of their.
Oh, yes, it
budget.
is. Yeah. So, I mean, are they expecting retirements? Are they expecting folks moving, or is this just what they're gonna do to the end? So I think we need to. That would be what I would suggest, is bring them in and find out why.
That's our suggestion too, is when we go to those Lincoln questions.
I agree. Could I just ask a quick question about, since you mentioned, DEM? I remember that we were going to check in this year because there was some loss of grants. And we were concerned about the costs, and there was.
One federal grant did arrive.
Okay, so it would be good to check in and see, cause there was some challenges with meeting their budget. And I believe there was an effort to see if other jurisdictions would contribute more, and I know,
Efforts underway.
right, so it'd be good to get an update on that.
So we'll schedule, another thing Jason tracks for our office is the trajectory of these. We actually have another one that shows the things starting in pay cycle 6. So you can see whether they're trending back towards a 0 or if the gap is widened in each pay period. Just another thing, useful analysis when you're looking at the data, so we can start scheduling a few of those coming in. Another thing we brought up just by way of throwing it out there last time we met, but we wanted to just ask a bit more definitively, does the board want to consider a hiring freeze? And if there's a hiring freeze, is it across the board? Is it for departments just that are in red? While they're in red, they get out of the red, they can do it. But with labor being, anywhere from 2/3 to 3/4, as high as 90% in some small departments, it is. When you get into bigger numbers, it is the mechanism. And then of course, this would be over BOCC departments. There would be hoops to jump through to implement one with separately elected, the way we implemented our budget last December. But do we want to mandate a slowing down of
Got some, Scott?
Or you've got information from Matt's team that kind of informs on some different choices you can make, whether it's hiring freezes, budget amendments, because those have some ties to it. There's also the reminder to all of the electeds of their personal responsibility when it comes to staying within their budget. So you can take a number of different roles. I might suggest that you start first with the most direct one, and that's just reminding them, all the electeds, that they have a personal financial obligation to stay within their budget. That way you don't go through a number of iterations of hiring freezes and budget amendments and whatnot. We certainly your team can manage the non-electeds with very clear direction to them. You will not go above your budget. So we are talking with each of them to say, hey, is this trend going to change? And if not, you're going to have to do adjustments. It's not a choice. You have to do adjustments with you have an empty position, you have to keep it open for maybe a couple weeks or a month or so. So we have some of those conversations going on, but that's just some other things to consider, especially when it comes to the other electeds, which the levers to pull are a little bit more challenging.
I agree with sending the letter to all the different elected official. Just explaining.
I agree.
We're in a projected $25 million deficit, where the board is actively working with the budget office on all options. To make sure we remain solvent as a county, and so we're reminding you that you need to stay within your budget, and if you're having challenges, you need to come and work with the budget. If you need some assistance, we're here for you. But I think we can't, I'm concerned about the sheriff's office. I mean, it's trending in a very, very high, potentially, it could be $3 million over budget by the end of the year. We can't sustain that. So they need to figure out how to rein that in, and if that's their own hiring freeze, then that's their own hiring freeze. So I just think we need to send that letter. And then I guess my only hesitation on a hiring freeze is that sometimes there's unintended consequences. Like last year, I think we did one, and then I remember hearing from Tori that she was right in the middle of hiring some essential positions in the Juvenile Justice Center. So I just don't wanna like, I wanna figure out how to do that, but allow for some of those essential positions to be, that we do need to fill for, you know, safety. So,
I think getting ahead of it now.
yeah, I think it's important,
Yes, a good
but we're
idea.
gonna have to allow for some flexibility. Obviously, detention services, we've gotta fill positions there. So anyway, those are my thoughts.
We'll schedule the departments to come in where we identify a unsustainable trend line, to have them come in and discuss with the board what that why that trend line is occurring and what adjustments they're making to stage the budget.
Hopefully all these trainings, and if they need more training on using Workday to manage, you know, and anticipate. I know we have staff that'll help folks figure that out.
Yep.
So,
And that's the one of the meetings that Commissioner Brooks led a couple weeks ago, to provide these reports and show the departments exactly where to get them. So there's no question about what book of records are being used. It's this, whatever the commissioners are saying is what departments should be using on.
I think it's important that we educate all of our department heads and elected officials of the obligations that they have when it comes to the budget appropriations and their responsibility to remain within those appropriations. So,
And, so we'll work on getting the letter sent around, we'll work on scheduling with the VLCC. Passes passing out the calendar, Commissioners Brooks and French, you'll have an email from Jason. With the calendar, it's the same calendar we passed out, we were gonna hear it 2 weeks ago. Just wanted to see if we're ready to move that from draft to finalize these dates. Or if commissioners found any conflicts we need to work with. Of course, it's a living document, we can make changes as we go. But is it in a solid state to at least publish it as a final draft at this point? The changes from previous year will be, we're gonna be asking for revenue estimates separate from the rest of the budget to get more focus on revenue adjustments. I had the same roundtables, one of them is an evening roundtable. Reminder, budget is the Tuesday before Labor Day this year. Usually it's the day after Labor Day, but the way the calendar falls. We'll kick off budget before Labor Day, and it's a little bit late on the backside. Final adoption is December 7th. Again, those are RCW requirements and the way the calendar falls this year.
the only thing I see is that, I don't know if Commissioner Brooks is gonna go to the NACO National Association of Counties annual meeting, but it might conflict with the 20th of July. I could probably zoom in if I go, but just. But I think we could probably zoom in if we're there.
well, that's just a briefing
Yeah,
on it
that's
too.
just a
Right.
standard
Yeah,
briefing.
that's
So,
great.
yeah, I think there could be flexibility in July.
Knowing that
Everything
that's
else looks-
a maybe we
everything
could
else
try
looks
to
good.
downplay that date as much as possible.
Yep.
But everything else looks good to me. So you got the public roundtables on here, okay?
The gray and the bottom.
Yeah, Commissioner Brooks?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to take a look at it with my schedule. As we know, I've got some transitioning that's gonna be happening in my for me. So let me take a look at it and I will let you know. I'll have Brenda, kind of inform you guys tonight as to which ones I may be zooming into.
Perfect, thank you. Once we hear back from everybody later this week, okay.
Like the other commissioner that was gonna look at it.
Yeah, it's in their inbox.
Be
Yes.
emailed.
So we'll follow up with Commissioner Jordan also, since he's not present. And then the last sheet, sorry, got ahead of myself. We're
Yeah,
doing this one.
This
Okay.
one, this one, yep.
Um,
Sorry.
pass these down. Jason will help speak to this one also. This is a sheet and you emailed this to Commissioners French and it's titled 2027 budget preparation, Commissioner Brooks and French and what Jason sent you. The goal of this is to kind of make it real. The first column is the 2026 budget. And we are going against the 26 budget, which is why at the top you see the gap is 28 million, a bigger gap than we talked before, because we're going from the 26 budget, we're not going from the 27 forecast, which includes additional sales tax revenue. And it also includes
Here's your timeline.
it also includes the additional million at the 35% liability level, which you made an assumption on. But if you look at the 26 level, and then you go over to the third column, each department has different paid employees, of course. So it gives you the average employee cost by department, because not all employees are equal when it comes to pay. And then it will show you the fourth column over impacted FTE. If you were to do a flat budget, similar to what we did from 25 to this year, and it was balanced only with FTEs, that fourth column would show you the number of FTEs that would need to be reduced by department, by that department's average, to balance the budget. And if you add up column 4 at the bottom, you're at 192 is what that column adds up to. Some departments would be able to do some M&O. A lot of our M&O is related to IT, such as Workday. We can't cut Workday by 20%. We either have Workday or we don't have Workday. And as a lot of our IT is, we also have multi-year contracts. And then our biggest M&O countywide by far, what detention services is the medical contract, which is mandated, and the food. Feeding 800 inmates 3 meals a day is not cheap. And so, yes, you could reduce the number of FTEs, but we just wanted to show the magnitude of what we're dealing with. The vacant FTE column furthest to the left, take that one with a grain of salt. We're still doing some final cleanup, but it's pretty close. Jason and Tess are meeting with Sarah Erb in HR later today, hoping to do some final cleanup there. That one's going to be awfully close, but it's not necessarily 100%. Other things to speak to on this, Jason?
Not intended to be.
You have an asterisk there, some missing data on here. When can we expect that to come through?
We're gonna be doing some of the FTE cleanup today, and we're working with the sheriff's office to, like I said, align the figures, so.
Between the move from PeopleSoft to Workday and a department as large as the sheriff's office, where promotions, transfers, title changes happen, the complete reconciliation has been challenging. a lot of time has already been put into it, that's it, continuing tonight.
Thank you.
Is there any other data points? Variations that you could think of right now, ways to present the data that you would like? Before this point, I know as we go further, ideas will come to mind.
Yeah, for comment.
Go for it, Scott. I was just on these, can you put totals at the bottom? Thank you.
We can add totals into it.
I was just going to reinforce what Jeff mentioned earlier. These assume that to achieve the $28 million reduction, it all comes through salaries and benefits and headcount.
Yeah.
There will be some departments that can do some M&O. There will be some departments that can't. So this is without getting into a very sophisticated us guessing which departments can actually reduce their M&O. I just wanted to highlight to the extent that they can, that means that their impacted FTEs would be less.
And we're also not assuming there'll be a few $1 million of sales tax money here. So that would allow you to buy back kind of on the order of the matrix we went through last year, the red, yellow, green. You'll be able to apply $2 to $3 million of additional revenue where you want to prioritize it based on this, which would minimize that by 2025 bodies.
Right.
And then next, I believe we have Heather getting on ARP.
We just, when we come back in 2 weeks, this is just starting to frame the target budget conversation here. When we come back in 2 weeks, we discussed for the calendar, trying to have a letter out to the all the departments by the first week in June.
Correct.
First week of June would be our ideal.
So our idea would then be to have the board be establishing those target budgets by that Monday that we meet in June, the first Monday. We'll have documentation to help you kind of go through and look at that stuff as well.
We are, Rebecca Homagis is working the schedule with each of the 5 of you for budget to come and meet and kind of do a in your office working session too.
Yeah.
Between now and then. Just to get some more info from that.
That's good.
That is ARP. So we currently have about 3.5 million left in ARP that remains unspent. The largest portion of that is Comcast. They notified us recently that we should be expecting a bill any day. We've been hearing that for months, so hopefully that's gonna come to fruition soon. The rest of it's pretty small potatoes. The health district's getting ready to reseal the roof. I would expect that to be done by the end of the summer. Campfire's got a little bit remaining in ARP. The remainder of their money is in general fund. We have some laptops to be purchased by IT. City of Irway Heights just has a $90 amount there. That the rest of their contracts in general fund. And then the sheriff has $378,000 for real-time crime center, which we expect to be spent down likely by the end of June. Worst case would be the end of September. So that's everything left in actual ARP. If we go to the next slide. Remaining in our general fund contracts, we have about 6.5 million. Of those contracts, as a reminder, all these projects were submitted in 2022. They were awarded either in late 22 or early 2023. We do have about 3 million of this 6.5 is internal public works cleanup that we still need to do. So we have about 3.5 that's everybody else. And we have 4 agencies that are requesting project changes. As you recall, when we made the shift to move contracts out of ARP to general fund, The general idea was that we were gonna hold them to their original ARP timelines, their original ARP projects, but it would give us flexibility to move within their original ARP buckets, which would not have been allowed if we left them in ARP. So if we move to the next slide. The first request is from Campfire. They have completed their weatherization project, but they would like to move funds to repave the road that comes into the camp and retile the pool. They have about $55,000 remaining. If we choose to deny this request or any of these requests, these funds do fall back to the general fund. Feast Collective is the next one. They originally had $50,000 set aside to do capital improvements to a kitchen in a facility that they were going to lease. A lot of situation came up with that facility. Turned out they didn't have, the facility wasn't up to code with its wiring, and so they ended up not getting into that facility. And so this bucket has just been sitting there. They would like to move this to salaries and benefits to continue operating. But they don't intend on doing any further capital. Inovia currently is probably the second highest sitting. We did just receive a request for reimbursement, so they're sitting right about just shy of 1.9 million. Their average bill is about 131,000. It does take a pretty significant amount of time to get through their bill, so we just reimbursed December of 2025. They're requesting an extension to be able to run their project through 2028. And then last is Town of Fairfield. We had previously, you had given them the go-ahead to purchase a piece of equipment that they were going to use to do their sewer project. Sounds like they have purchased that, they just haven't requested reimbursement yet, but they would like to shift the remaining funds to a water sewer project that they did in 24 that they did not have enough CDBG funds through Georgia's team to cover.
So the project is done.
But the project is done.
So is need feedback on whether we approve these? We need to know whether the board approves these, and we'll let the groups know.
Commissioner Brooks.
I think, as everyone knows, I've been okay with some of these. Some of them, when they've totally shifted to something completely different, I've had more issues with. So I think that's what I need to make sure I'm clear on, which ones are shifting. Like Feast looks like they're shifting away from what they were originally planned for. Is that correct?
Feast actually had some salaries and benefits in their original award. This would just move more money to salaries and benefits. We typically capped everybody at no more than 15%. This would exceed them way beyond 15%.
Okay.
I'm
I
not.
mean, I think that's what
I'm not comfortable with that one.
Yeah. What I don't want to
Yeah.
do is get into like a, as everyone knows, Inovia was one of my projects. They're still doing what they're saying they were going to do. They're just extending it, which I think is a better idea, because otherwise they were just going to have to spend it. And so I actually didn't want them just to spend it. I wanted them to be intentional in how they spent it. And what we're seeing with the Safe and Healthy Task Force is they talk about our investments in the community and youth. This is one of those ways that we keep kids out of our system, is by continuing to invest in Launch Northwest. And it's not a continuation of our investment, it's just fulfilling our investment obligation in my mind. So in Town of Fairfield, obviously Fairfield's in my district. I think that they're using it again for purposes that met all those needs, and we're if their sewer project's done, but they're wanting to use the extra, just like we did in I think we did that for Rockford as well, where we let them use the additional funds for a similar type project. I'm okay with that.
The Fairfield project, the original project just came in way under budget. Is why there's extra funds there.
Yeah, but they're wanting to use those additional funds for another type of water sewer project, correct?
I think it's actually continuing the same project a few blocks further. Is that wrong?
Okay,
This one's a.
Yeah.
Sounds like,
Type of infrastructure.
okay. How are they currently paying for it? I mean, if they're trying to just shift these dollars to a different project,
Without these funds, they just wouldn't do the project.
I thought you said the project was
So
done.
this project is done, so I'm,
They've spent the money. Oh, I did not realize that.
No, it sounds,
Sounds like it.
my understanding was
They
that
spent the money, they just, because it's different.
they wanna they wanna shift this to cover a different project that was
Fair.
unrelated.
Fairfield has gone through a couple of clerks. And so I think that with the shift, the bills just haven't been submitted. I think that they expected that this would be allowed, just because the current clerk wasn't aware that they actually had an identified projects that this was already supposed to go towards. I think they proceeded with the interpretation that this would be allowed.
With the small towns, some of them have a part-time staff person. It's very different than working with even a mid-size, Cheney Deer Park. We often talk to, I think, the mayor of Waverly or Latah from our kitchen table, it's a town of 100 people. It's very different than the organization.
Yeah.
Processes we have in bigger jurisdictions.
Commissioner French?
right, and
Oh,
sure,
sorry, good. Oh. Commissioner French?
Well, no, I want Commissioner Brooks to finish her comments. I don't want to cut her off.
have to figure out how to unmute once I'm muted. I think so. Cheryl was a long time clerk down in Fairfield, and yes, she retired about a year, and it has not been as consistent since then. And I know like Rockford's been trying about I think 40,000. It was to we let them use for a similar type project that continued, because as we've saw with George, CDBG funds are hard to come by for some of these smaller towns. And so this was, again, one of the chances that they had to actually do the project. So I don't know if we need to just sit down with the clerk, and Brenda and I can do that and talk to them to see what's going on in Fairfield. I'm happy to do.
But, and I notice on the thing, it says this would be 2 project changes.
It
So
would be
after
the second project change that we made, because the first
Okay.
project change that we made was to allow them to purchase the.
Oh, that's right. You said equipment, they moved it to a water project, and then this, they want to use what's remaining to pay for
Correct.
a second water project that was unrelated to the one that the other one. Okay, got it.
Is there any challenges that we face with the federal government if these projects keep? I know we moved the money to be able to be more flexible, but is there any challenge with the paperwork when we send stuff back into the federal government about what the ARPA funds went to, if there's like several different changes?
No, because most of these changes are happening now in general fund, which is why they,
Okay,
when they were in the ARP funds, we had to keep their project pretty much the same.
right,
We can make general changes, but in order to keep fairness in how they were scored, we had to keep them in their same category. So if there were changes that would have taken them outside their category, they could make those changes. One example we had of that was the YWCA. They wanted to make a change from a capital investment to,
Or when they go from building storage lockers to inputting sprinkler systems. If it was a very competitive category, it could have scored differently, so we couldn't say yes. These are all general fund. As you recall, about $50 million of ARP in the end backed first responders and the salaries of people who qualified during the COVID pandemic, which freed up some capacity that these general fund awards are given out. So the board has fairly broad discretion with these.
Yeah, I just, to some degree, I feel like, you know, I want to be flexible, but I also, if a project was completed and it was under budget, normally if you get a grant, you don't just get to use the rest of it for another project. So, you know, we were, again, the dollars were to do a particular project or effort. And if that's complete, or maybe we modified it because that project no longer was needed and they did another project, but at a certain point, it's not like we guaranteed a certain amount of money to each entity. We said this is funding for a particular project. We were pretty flexible and allowed for some different projects. But at a certain point, it was not a guarantee. It wasn't a guaranteed grant for a dollar amount. So that's my concern, that on some of these, just because there's money remaining does not mean that it's just money that can be spent for any purpose. So, but
Commissioner French?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So, for me, I just go back to philosophically, what was our approach when we originally started to do this? And for me, it was, one-time expenditures to either build capacity or meet an urgent need. And so a lot of that money did that exactly. But now, can you put that last slide back up again, Ron? For me, I mean, moving funds from a capital to payroll, that doesn't, if I'm gonna subsidize payroll, I'd rather do it for the county and keep a sheriff's deputy on the road than to feed for another, organization and stuff. So, and with regard to the campfire, I don't know whether the repaving the road and the pool is a need or a want. And so I'd want to be able to get more information about that. And same thing with the shift of funds for the new water project. I mean, is that a need or a want? And taking advantage of an opportunity, because keep in mind that every one of these that we fund means that it's going to be more challenging for us to close our budget and stuff. So just thank you.
Yeah, the campfire, my understanding, it was for a pool project originally, correct?
Originally, they were
Or is this
gonna
something
fill
different?
in the pool and build a splash pad.
Yes.
It's a camp, so think
Yeah.
of kids, water activities. There were some issues with, I believe, cost there.
correct.
So we allowed them to not do the splash pad and rehabilitate the pool. And this was all, it was still all under ARP because it was still water activities for kids in a youth camp. So it was all variation on a theme. The pool did not cost as much as their grant. So we expanded some, like we let them buy a pool cover.
So
There's some other pool related stuff that was authorized, and now we're, pool retiling, you could say is still part of the tool. The road is definitely a completely different thing.
I would just throw out, I'd be comfortable with the pool retiling, but probably not repaving the road. That, to me, that doesn't seem like that would be related. The Feast Collective, I'm concerned about shifting so much over to salaries and I mean, we capped that at 15% for everybody else. If that puts us over for them, I don't think that's right. Fairfield, I mean, if it wasn't part of the original plan, if this is just being viewed, like Commissioner French was saying, being viewed as excess money kind of out there, and they're just looking at I mean, if the project is done, but it was unrelated to this, I think it just kind of makes me think they see a pot of money out there to help take care of some bills. Inovia, I mean, my issue with that is, I mean, we've allowed them a great deal of flexibility, I believe, since it originally started. Are they capped at the 15% on salaries?
Yes.
And I don't think they are. I think, didn't they hire people?
That
They have
one was,
staff,
yeah, there's program stuff.
but their
There were-
admin is capped.
The admin is capped. There were exceptions made, kind of like government, when it takes people to do what is being accomplished. And they were given some flexibility because of the nature of their programs, but the admin side was capped.
My concern about that is they originally, I believe, asked for $10 million. We gave them 5. They knew the deadline was the end of 26. They're asking to go to 28, and they still haven't even been able to spend down the 5. They originally asked for 10.
So,
And they've got, I mean, I think they got ARP from the city and the valley.
so.
Are they in the
context
same
around-
situation with them, or did they spend
The
their?
city also gave 5.
Okay,
They required it to be spent, say, $1 million a year for 5 years. It was kind of, I don't know if that's the exact dollar amount, but if you didn't spend $1 million in 22, you lost the delta.
okay.
So they did spend heavy with the city in the first years to fully utilize those funds. Can't speak to the valley. The valley did give money. I don't know what their. So I think there is a case, as Commissioner Brooks said a little bit ago. They're probably gonna spend it one way or the other.
Yeah.
If we say no, I would assume they'd fast track our spending. That's just an assumption. I don't know.
Commissioner Brooks, and then when you're done, Commissioner French.
Yeah, no, that was part of it with Inovia was that, yes, they were trying to spend down first the city funds, which I was aware of. So I knew that that was part of what was happening. And yes, they've stayed within their contract. They have not, they're just asking for an extension. I don't believe we've amended their contract, have we, Beth?
No, there's been,
So we're still working under the same original contract that was approved. So yes, and yes, we did 5 million, the city did 5 million, and again, they were spending the cities down, I think, ahead of ours. And I think the Valley only did 1 million. So, but I can, we can have Ben come in. I thought he came in and talked about the things that they were doing. And so I'm happy to have him come back in and talk about it.
Commissioner French?
Yeah, so I know that we've got another item on our agenda, and I've got a hard stop at 12 o'clock. I'm down here in Salt Lake City, and I'm meeting with a group of leadership around Todd Development for Transit. And so, I mean, we could beat this thing to death, but have we beat it enough to where we can move on to the other item on the agenda?
my takeaway today is, I think I've heard 3 no's for Feast, because it's a different change. And a no to the road for Campfire. I think the others would be bringing back. I don't hear consensus. If my consensus is wrong, please tell me.
I'm okay with that. It seems like that's what we at least.
Yeah, I would like
Agree
Commissioner Brooks to have a
Yep.
chance to check with Fairfield. But I agree with your 2 points about no to the salary and benefits and the road, because I do think that the pool is still related to the original project. I worry about subsidizing salaries and benefits because that wasn't the original intent. And
So that
But-
half of them knocked out.
but yes, Inovia, I mean, I think they're doing good work. I just want to see that. I'm not on the board. I don't know all the ins and outs, but I know that they're helping students get college and career ready. So I'd love to get some updated stats, you know, from this year. And so I know that Commissioner Brooks and Commissioner Jordan are more involved on that.
Commissioner Brooks, could you request that they come in at a future meeting?
Yes, I will do that, I have them come in. And then to Commissioner French's comment, I think we've hit this enough. I do have to go though, so I will not be on for the rest of the meeting this morning. So I'll leave it to the three of you.
Okay,
With that, we are done unless there are questions.
thank you guys for your hard work. Well, we know where your offices are and you know where ours are, so. Okay, next up, that will bring us to Scott Chesney with an update on our comprehensive plan and the work that has been going on with that huge effort. He will be filtering in here shortly. There we are. Hello.
So there's.
Thank you for your time today. We, this is our one of our periodic briefings. We've got a modest agenda to go through, 4 main items. Next slide, please. And we'll hit all of these and take some time for your direction and questions. First one is going to be quite brief. We're the environmental impact statement. Next, please. If you recall, we've had 3 approaches to the EIS, a no action alternative, the alternative 1, which is almost exclusively a density increase, and alternative 2, which is to look at our historic development patterns, which we've identified here, about 4.5 dwelling units per acre, and then using infill zoning to foster a mix of uses across the barrier. We expect to receive our draft EIS tomorrow. Next slide, please. And that will give us our first look at the findings based on transportation modeling, based on our target areas that were identified earlier in the year. We will be back with you on June 1st to have the initial discussion of what does that mean for our growth. And that will also start to suggest what we would be putting forward for you to consider as a preferred alternative, and there'll be various flavors of that for your consideration and guidance. We've scheduled 4 public open houses. The dates here, the last week in May, first week in June. So a couple of those will happen before we see you and a couple afterwards. And then we will come back for the range of the preferred alternatives in late June. Next slide, please. And a reminder of where things stand. This is the target study areas map. The infill areas are predominantly in the hatched areas, notably on the West Plains and in the North Metro. The green targets are the centers of study areas with that coral shape around them. It's about a half-mile radius. And then those are our primary study areas that we'll be looking at tomorrow. The red areas are UGA swap requests from specific communities, Airway Heights, Medical Lake, and you can see a very tiny dot on the north end of Cheney as well. So that's where we stand with the EIS. Nothing new, but like I said, we're expecting our first results tomorrow. With that, we will be publishing, publishing that draft EIS on Friday for a 30-day comment period that will end in June. Any thoughts or questions about EIS? Go ahead.
You're gonna have some open houses, it looks like.
Yes.
May 26th, 27th, June 2nd and 3rd. And so those are open to the public to look at these options and give us feedback.
Yes, they will be out in the public at 4 venues. I believe we've used them all before.
Okay, did you send all that info to the commissioners?
We have not, because we wanted to make sure we had the EIS in hand
Oh.
before we confirmed those.
Before you start advertising.
It's,
In case something goes sideways.
as it has, the EIS has been delayed, several times, a total of about 90 days. And so
And
we,
this is the contractor that we've hired to help us
yes,
with it.
yes, and partially because the initial cut at the transportation modeling was going to be done with SRTC. They didn't have the capacity. We had to shift it back to the contractor. They had to get ready to do that. And that just simply caused a 30-60 day delay.
So waiting on advertising until you get the EIS, make sure that
If it's in my hands tomorrow.
all of our questions are answered before we get it out to the public.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're scheduled to put ads in the paper a week before the first ones with all four of them, but at least a week's notice or 2 weeks notice for the second two. We'll be working with Sharissa on social media. We'll be using our email blast and our website. So we'll use every tool we have and we'll send them to you and the commissioners for your own distribution as well.
Okay, thanks. But that's why you're holding back a little bit to make sure you get a look at these.
Yeah,
In case there's any questions or things that need to go back to
exactly.
for further study. Okay.
Exactly. So, next, please. Our next topic, critical area ordinance. While not directly a part of the comp plan itself update, it is an important part of our work, notably the implementation parts of the comprehensive plan. So we have been working on this update now for a couple of years. So you can see the kind of the schedule or where it started. It hasn't been done in quite a while. Next, please. And we're looking at, kind of a broad basis of where things stand. Kind of a reminder from the WACs. It's, these 5 are the highlights of what are called or considered critical areas. Please. And then just to give you a little bit of a summary of a couple of highlighted areas. And we did submit the CAO both in a clean and a red line version in your packets, if you were so inclined to dig through all 400 pages of it. But it's a couple of highlights. Wetlands, we're looking at consolidating buffer options, making corridor standards, removing some reduction standards. Next, please. Habitat conservation areas, looking at vegetation removal restrictions, stream crossing guidance, riparian buffer width, all of things that have changed in the best available science in the last 10 years or more. Next, please. Buffer updates, you will see these are being a little more rigorous than what had existed in the past and moving in some cases from non-fish from a 25-foot buffer to a 100-foot buffer. In any case, all buffer are subject to wetland specialist delineation at the time of a project. And so if a specialist comes in and says 100 foot is not required to maintain this buffer, these have some flexibility, but only when a credentialed specialist can write a report to do that. Next, please. And then really the key element for planning is the critical aquifer recharge areas. Well-known, well understood for the Spokane Valley Rathdrum Prairie Aquifer, not as well known or understood for the Grand Ronde Aquifer on the West Plains and the other parts of that. So we're updating, and we'll see in the kind of next slides. We're putting a major update into the CARA system and mapping. The mapping needs to be updated to better reflect the West Plains situation. Next, please. And you can see these next few slides are related to comments we've received in our meetings, notably from the first one, April 9th. Adding definitions, getting PFAS recognized, updating the CARA mapping for the West Plains. Looking at making sure we've got enforcement rules. We're not necessarily recommending changes of the enforcement, but like here you can see requiring qualified professional evaluations happening. Next, please. And then related to the best available science summary, is mapping the new cars with the West Plains, making those changes so that people looking to grow can find appropriate guidance in the comprehensive plan and in the critical area ordinance that will help decide where you should build and with what conditions and with what potential hazards. Next, please. This is
Can I
a,
ask just a quick question about so the definition for PFAS, like talking about pollution, that's where it should land in the critical area. It's considered part of a critical area, or how does that?
no, technically, no. Pollution is an entirely
Right.
separate thing.
Right.
We're mapping it because it fits into the implementation side of how you use the ordinance. So the best available science, which is on this first map, shows, for example, the paleo channels on the West Plains that were not mapped before. It shows where PFAS contamination is high. So they're like appendix materials.
Okay.
The CAO can't fix something that's already broken. It's not a reparations ordinance. It's a future looking ordinance to
Right.
guide new development. But we want best available science and the most complete hydrogeologic information we can get for people to make those decisions.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good idea. I just didn't know how it fit in the growth plan,
Yeah.
it's interesting.
It's kind of a, if you've got a Venn diagram and you got the CAO on one side and the comp plan on the other, this is like right in between. It fits in that because it'll fit into frequently flooded areas or stormwater management considerations over here, but it fits into how do you set up lands for building on this side. So that's why we thought it was important to bring this in.
Yeah.
And to be, sure, we have learned a great deal of this from Chad Pritchard, professor at Eastern, and from residents and businesses on the West Plains that came to our early sessions, and they were unhappy with the county's progress at documenting this, at using this as information where you should build, where you shouldn't build. And we are truly grateful for the public involvement on this because it's made a huge difference. I mean, this map is just showing some of that PFAS contamination. Generally speaking, the diagonal line is I-90, the horizontal one in the middle is Highway 2. So the airports are both there, Airway Heights. And you can see it's pretty extensive. It trails, in that drainage channel all the way north to the Spokane River. Next, please. And this is just another sample. The sort of peach area in the middle is kind of two-toned. It's all the same stormwater flooding risk area. These are data that we have. They're in our engineering maps, but they're not as fully used in our planning maps. And so again, when we're talking about best available science and pulling information into places where it can be seen and used to make decisions, this is a key element. In that lower left corner of the screen is the Medical Lake interchange on I-90. And essentially what's called the West Terraces area. That's one that's been subject to an enormous amount of flooding from stormwater because through Pritchard's work, the groundwater percolates through there. The basin for the aquifer is so high that it is almost at soil level. And so there's no place for water to percolate. There's no place for it to go. We think, and that's a group of very frustrated people out there, but we think this kind of information is important for people to understand before we do planning and before you start coming in and platting lots that need some consideration.
Yes. Thank you.
But if you're using historical data, you're ignoring the fact that the county just invested almost $6 million to address the flooding situation that existed, several years ago, but now has been addressed. So how does that reflect in here?
It will reflect. This is a map from, like I said, from our engineering map survey. As that system, as any system can ameliorate some of the drainage considerations, that'll come into play in the stormwater manual, and it'll come into play on these maps. They may not be listed as hazard areas anymore, for example. Any other questions on CAO, best available science? Okay, next please. Next category is our rural lands element, and in some cases, this is not changing very much. And remember, this is a little different than the resource lands. The rural lands can be used for agriculture, but are not specifically protected for agricultural, forestry, or mining uses. And so what we're doing is we're working to clarify these. And again, with our fellow county and regional planners through WASAC, we're looking at some work on improving the ability of using LAMRRDs, for example. There's more than 24 LAMRRDs in the county. Most are quite small, crossroads with a few homes or a few dozen homes. Some are a little more modest. The Growth Management Act lets them exist, but they can't expand. In some cases, they can get more dense, but you can't expand the logical outer boundary of them now. We want to look at creating these as a chance to move them into a new category. So next, please. There are 3 land use categories in the Spokane County code. The Rural Activity Center, which is the predominant version, and then the limited development areas. There's a residential and a commercial. We're looking at, we're kind of hinting out here. The vast majority of LAMRRDs, in fact, all of them in Spokane County are what's called type 1 LAMRRDs, which are that kind of mixed use, something that existed at a crossroads. And the rural activity centers we're looking to characterize as villages, something new. Next slide, please. And that approach is to say, why can't we have and support a low density rural lifestyle that is allowed to expand and have, like we're talking about for our neighborhood zoning, could have a new set of small shops or a market or employment possibilities, so that people wouldn't have to drive into a city from a LAMRRD that might be 5 miles away, but might be 25 miles away. And as I hinted with WASAC, we've got a group of planners working on a LAMRRD reform bill as part of a legislative initiative for the coming year. So you can see here, we're yes.
So would the changes that we might be proposing require a state policy change around language?
They would not, at this stage, no, they would not require a change.
Okay.
The LAMRRD change that we're proposing allows them to expand within scale, not to become sprawling, but to
Like a
expand
huge
within
big
scale.
box store or
Yes,
something.
that would
You're
not
talking
be.
more smaller shops.
Yeah.
Services.
Yeah, they used to be like a post office or a grain elevator or a
Right,
church
okay.
or a saloon, to leave them. to
So what would the state change then allow for?
expansion potentially of boundaries, so
Okay.
that they could, you could in fact add some limited housing or something on the perimeter.
Commissioner French.
Yeah, I just want to keep in mind the fact that, Airway Heights started out as a white spot on the road. Same thing with Liberty Lake and a lot of our small towns and stuff. So you have to start with some kind of convenience opportunities for those in the rural areas. Otherwise, you increase transportation demands into your urban areas and stuff, which is counterproductive in terms of trying to reduce the amount of trips and stuff. So, I don't want to, the LAMRRDs are a logical first step to create additional urban areas. But anyway, thank you.
And that's absolutely accurate. It's a tool whose time has come. And we've briefed part of this earlier, but when we now have a climate and resiliency element as part of the comprehensive plan system, that climate and resiliency talks about reducing greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle miles traveled. Well, if you have these villages that are a little more self-sufficient than they were before, you are clearly having a positive impact on cars coming off the road and attendant greenhouse gases. So we've got some good candidates, some up along the river, some the Four Lakes area on the interchange with 904. So we believe this is a viable tool for the next 20 years of growth. Next, please. The limited development areas are, there are not as many of these, and the most prominent of these is the North Mead area, which exists in urban zoning, but has both an LDA residential and an LDA commercial component to it for its comprehensive plan designation. We're not changing that nomenclature, we're not suggesting a change in that nomenclature, but the underlying the zoning may change a little bit in the sense that some of the neighborhood residential or the neighborhood business zone may now be more appropriate here. And you can see the last note on this. LDAs that already have urban services should be considered for future UGA status. We've had that discussion with Commerce, and they are supportive of the North Mead area becoming a place. We're not proposing it in 26 because it's also very complicated and it doesn't need to happen to affect the rest of the plan. Next, please. And then these last two slides on this are the designations that we currently have in our rural areas. We have what's called Rural 5. We're just changing that to rural residential to reflect that that's what it is. It's a 5 acre or so residential piece. Most prominent part of that is the Otis Orchards area on our east corridor, but it exists in a few other areas. In the current zoning and plan, no new 5 acre parcels may be created or permitted. And we're keeping that prohibition in this case, but we're keeping this as a permanent zoning category. Rural traditional, not changing in any meaningful way. It's still a 10 acre minimum. What we're looking at rural traditional though is the last part of this slide that says activity and event centers may be allowed here based on conditions and based on intensity. And so, that's different than saying we're allowing small business, because small businesses are generally not allowed unless they are resource-based or serve the resource or serve the local area. But you could have a wedding venue, you could have a corporate retreat center, you could have something like that in areas where it makes sense. And where those conditions are is mostly related to, if you're on a 5 or 10 acre parcel, how can you produce and hold an event center without unnecessarily annoying your neighbors? How do you protect the rest of the properties who want to live a quiet rural lifestyle and not have wedding parties every Saturday for 6 months at a time?
Commissioner French?
Yeah, the other thing that's happening in the state is, and the latest number that I've seen is that the state of Washington is losing 2 farms per day. 2 farms per day, because it's just become financially challenging to be able to farm in today's environment and stuff. And so providing additional revenue opportunities hopefully will save more farms from having to close up. Thank you.
We are acutely aware of that, and that's a very important part of our resource plans, and something we're going to pick up in 2 slides. Next, please. The last of our rural categories is rural conservation. This is, as you recall, this is again best available science, outlining areas of habitat, of fragile environmental or ecological lands. The study for this has shown, now using Fish and Wildlife and DNR, they've created a new 3-tier system. Tier 1 are the most important lands to protect, and that coincides with our RCV zone very well. Tier 2 is a slightly more expanded version of that, with new science saying you should look at these in another detail. And Tier 3 goes even further. Tier 3 could add hundreds of acres into rural conservation from rural traditional. We're not sure that's the best approach for Spokane County today, but we will be studying that in the EAS and going forward. But this is the conservation. It's a 20 acre minimum, and it is designed to protect fragile rural ecosystems.
ask one quick question on that? So is this where you might integrate some of the concern for wildland, wildland interface areas, or is that a different category?
It's a different category. It really is everywhere in rural and edges of cities as well. Yet another bill from the legislature that we're working on with our WASAC partners is what does that mean for planning? And it's something that will,
So how have we integrated it so far in our update?
it is integrated in the climate and resiliency element, specifically the resiliency side, where we partnered and worked with our emergency management plan.
Right.
And how that came together. So that's where it resides in the book, so to speak. It hasn't yet made its way into the land use section.
Yeah, I know that with the increased wildfire risks, I just was wondering, what are we gonna do to, mitigate that differently than we did 20 years ago with our plan?
Well, I
Is
believe
it,
as
times
we,
have changed, the climate's changed,
Yeah.
the conditions have changed, so what are we gonna do about that?
specifically,
Like,
nothing today.
Is there anything that drives out of the climate change chapter?
Yeah.
Like zoning or land use or recommendations for the actual
There's no,
codes?
right now, it's all goal and policy language on what we should do. And some of it, is obvious. It's planting cover around residential and commercial structures in rural areas. It's looking at where do cities, the city of the valley on the south side, is this up in Dishman Hills? How does that come into play? Are there fire breaks that should be actually used, physical separations? We're not seeing any specific recommendations coming out yet, or specific things would go into a code. But it's also something that the building code people are talking about as much as planning. Planning on the land use side, yeah, it can have an impact on how a plat could be done. Can you really plat out all of these lots without creating a hazard? Or how do you do it without creating a hazard? The building permit side and the setback side could be, if you're building in these areas, you must have a standing seam roof. You must use non-combustible siding. You must have a separation from plants. So there are some specific things. As you might imagine, there's a lot of passion on both sides or multiple sides of this argument. A lot of people who we've heard from, some in the rural areas, like, we don't need your help. We don't want your help. Just leave us alone. And there are others, insurance companies and others, that say this is important because we can prevent some of these losses.
So what will we be able to, what will drive any changes then? You're saying this update won't drive any particular changes to how we do business?
It will in the comp plan sense, because we have to have a resiliency component. And so that will overlap with our disaster planning and our emergency management planning. I don't know if it'll get into development codes at this stage. I think we're waiting a little bit on to see where the legislature goes in the next round on what does that wildland urban interface look like from a regulatory perspective in the RCW and the WAC, and then will we take some guidance from that to put it in our code.
So they're actively looking at
Yes.
potentially some statewide policies.
Yes, there was one bill that was passed in the last session already moving in that direction. That one we're trying to understand, and we will incorporate because it's already on the books.
Okay.
Next, please. Yeah, this is getting right at Commissioner French's interest and concerns, and all of you, I know, we've talked about this since 2023, and then in 24, the Supreme Court ruled against King County, and that has an effect of making us all look at how we deal with agritourism in the face of the Growth Management Act. but it's important for Spokane County. Certainly, we already have Green Bluff Growers Association, well-known, very popular. And so we've got a lot of this in place. We have had more than a dozen requests from others who want to come out of the shadows and operate agritourism events legally. And so we know there's huge interest in this going forward. And as Commissioner French noted, next please. This is good for all sorts of reasons. It provides, an economic boost to the county, to landowners, to farmers in particular. And it provides that buffering of income against a bad crop year or something, along those lines. And the important part, and the reason we made this distinct from the rural categories, is if you want to participate in agritourism, our recommendation to you is you must have the ag first. You can't create something that is related to agritourism on its own. It has to be part of agriculture in one form or another. That helps the argument from the Growth Management Act because we're not degrading ag uses or ag lands. We are, in fact, as the Commissioner at least hinted at, if we're providing a secondary source of income, we may be helping that farm stay alive in challenging times. So all of this is about using this for agricultural based tourism. And like these others, this is one that we're yet again working with Wasac planners on maybe a model code for agritourism. We are honestly quite a ways ahead of many of the counties that don't have something in place, and we're learning from some like King County, Snohomish County, Thurston County, and that do have some agritourism code in place, and we're getting some suggestions from them. So that will come along, and you can see some of the things we're considering in terms of basic terms. Next, please. And then this last one is just creating development rates, creating the rules by which this would have to operate. Green Bluff Growers is a very successful group. I'm sure all of us have been somewhere caught on those roads on Harvest Festival weekends, stuck for an hour or more. And while that's great, it brings up some of the obvious constraints. What happens if there's a medical emergency? What happens if there's a fire? Those roads are so filled, it's almost impossible to get emergency apparatus into the heart of that if something happens. So how this thing is managed and scaled is really important. Any thoughts or questions about this? Okay. Let's move on to our last topic for today, which is housing and the HAPT tool and HAPT allocation. You can, on this opening slide, is the very quick background of this. This was provided by Commerce for all of the jurisdictions to use. We went through, we meaning the PTAC, the planners group, went through several iterations of this tool. You adopted the methodology for this on January 21st of 25, and attached to that was how those allocations looked at the time, which was using population share as the input and then calculating housing unit allocations by jurisdiction and by income band. PTAC later had been working, but later in the month brought to the steering committee a change in the HAPT tool that moved from a population-based allocation to a housing unit-based allocation. And that the steering committee saw that in late January of 25. That is the tool that the communities have been using so far, and they're asking you to adopt those specific allocations for their guidance. Now, as you probably remember when we've talked about this, there was a lot of concern about HAPT tool. The first versions we saw were locked. We couldn't see the formulas. We couldn't see how anything was calculated. And then when it went from a population-based allocation to a housing-based allocation, the numbers changed, but not in a proportionate way. The logic would say if your share from population was this many housing units and you changed to a housing unit, it should be essentially the same, adjusted for group quarters and what Commerce called the homeless factor. But it didn't, and we've got some diagrams to share as we go on here. Point was, there was not uniform comfort with HABT. It continued mostly of its own momentum because the PTAC couldn't agree on any other changes or approach that every municipality would use. Next, please. So you've seen this diagram or this matrix several times. This is the population estimate forecast based on the OFM data, and it shows the roughly 100,000 increase from 2023 to 2046 for Spokane County. OFM's projections are conservative. They're generally 1% or less in a year. What we've learned in Spokane County, and by the way, this is Commissioner French remembers this very well. The concern of Spokane County overreaching its estimate in the 2015 era that led to part of the settlement agreement was that it had picked a number that was too big. And yet in the 5 years after that, as we started the plan update in 21, the county had already hit its 10-year target. It had already grown faster than it was forecast. OFM essentially took that bump and regressed it to the mean. As I said, they brought it back down to, well, you can't grow at that 3% rate forever, so we're going to put you back at the 1% or less rate, which makes it a very conservative number. Nonetheless, you can see in this the share of the unincorporated county and the incorporated. So inside the UGA, 30,000 growth inside the cities as a total, about 65,000 out of that 100,000. Next, please. And by the way, that 1% would be in this period about 4,300 people a year. So this is reflecting the change to housing share from population share. That was done by PTAC, notably by the city of Spokane, creating a persons per housing index for each of the jurisdictions. And it, as we learned, that persons per housing changed somewhat dramatically from different places to different places. So that helped explain why the housing share changed, why the city of Spokane's numbers went up, because their population per housing number was dropped fairly, from 2.5 to 2.1 or 2.2. The counties was left at roughly the same, 2.7 to 2.5. And that dropped the county's number from about 22,000 units to 17,000 units. And so that was one of the concerns we've had going in. Now, Commerce did approve that housing share allocation, and that's why the municipalities have been using it ever since. Next, please. This reflects the actual number difference. Yes. Sorry.
We're using it too. The housing share.
Yes.
We calculated all of our EIS materials with housing share as well.
Yes, we have so far. That's correct.
Okay, because you said municipalities, but also.
Well, they are further along. We are just getting our EIS, but the allocations in the study areas were based on the zoning changes in neighborhood residential, neighborhood business. Those zoning changes anticipated the densities that could be in the housing share or in the population share. But yes, we have used it. But this shows the actual number differences, and I understand it's hard to see. But one of the things that was most frustrating to the county is at the top line. Under the first allocation, the county was assigned 3,500 populate or units in the unincorporated rural areas, so outside of the urban growth areas. Using the housing share, somehow that got calculated to almost 6,200 units. And one of the questions we had for Commerce, among others, was how is a tool that's supposed to be generating housing within urban growth areas suddenly doubling the share of housing outside of the urban growth area? There was no satisfactory answer to that. Well, what Commerce has said, and they have put this in writing to you as well as to us, is that the county is able to share or to shape that number as it fits the classic patterns of development. Meaning our analysis shows that that's 6,200 based on our current rural permitting volumes over time, and reducing that by 4 or 5% a year, just reflecting that some of the rural growth is going to slow and some of it will in fact go inside of an urban growth area. We see the need for just about 3,000 total rural housing units in the 20-year horizon. And so that number is going to move that 6,195 or 6,200 down by 3,000 and move the unincorporated UGA up by 3,000 units. Otherwise, the rest of those numbers reflect what were allocated from the housing side versus the population side. And you can see many of them went higher, a couple went lower. Next slide, please.
So can I just?
Yeah,
clarify?
you had asked your follow-up, and then Commissioner French, you're up after.
So what you're saying is, and we discussed this at the steering committee, and I read the letters from Commerce, and everyone seems to support it, is moving of the 6,000 in unincorporated rural, moving 3,000 of that to unincorporated UGA, so that makes that number more like 21,000.
Right.
Okay, but we would have to take that action as a board to do that,
Yes,
to make that change.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll be a recommendation coming from us. And depending on how you want to process this, it would go to, or the fastest track on this is we're comfortable with the analysis leading to that number. We could have that for the steering committee at their June 17th meeting for them to call the public hearing and then make a recommendation to you. So next, please.
Hang on, Commissioner French?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Just wanted to expand on this a little bit. The HAP process goes back 30 years, and the challenge with that is that that's before the cities of Liberty Lake and Spokane Valley incorporated, and so all that population showed up as unincorporated Spokane County, and that distorts the numbers pretty dramatically. And I agree that the population number needs to be increased, and for the unincorporated UGA boundary, we need to put more of that into the boundary and not outside of the boundary in rural areas and stuff. The other thing is that the analysis distorts what's happening with the city of Spokane. City of Spokane has been dropping population relative to the rest of the county for the last 25 years of growth. And in fact, in 2000, they represented about 48% of the county. Numbers that I got a couple of weeks ago show that they are down to 39.19% of the total population, which means that people with their dollars are choosing to live somewhere else and not in the city of Spokane. And that needs to be reflected. Otherwise, the significant amount of this growth that we're projecting is going to continue to happen in Kootenai County. And again, at the steering committee, and I want to put this on the record, the Board of Realtors hired an outside consultant to identify what the economic impact of lost revenue for Spokane County is to Kootenai County, and that number was $950 million. That's not sustainable. We just spent 2 hours going through our budget for next year, talking about how our revenues are not keeping pace where their expenses. Well, part of it is because a significant part of our workforce is choosing to live in Kootenai County, coming over here for a better paying job and spending the dollars that should be spent here in Spokane County over in Kootenai County. And that's just not sustainable and stuff. So I'm hoping that when we get down to the final adoption of here, we'll do something that's realistic with what's going on here in Spokane County and not what was going on 30 years ago. Thank you.
Can I ask Commissioner French, are you suggesting an alteration different than the shifting the unincorporated rural number to the unincorporated UGA? Do you think additional alterations or changes need to be made?
Well, I'd like to see where the city of Spokane plans to accommodate 22,359 housing units. That's unrealistic. I mean, they can't even keep pace with the capital needs for their existing UGA. I'll keep in mind, the city, when adopted the comp plan in May of 2001, anticipated there'd be 20,000 residents going into Latah Valley. Here we are 25 years later, and they haven't even met the capital needs of Latah Valley, much less a lot of the other city and stuff. And so it's just unrealistic. And I hope that when we get down to the next level of this thing, we'll get to some realistic numbers. And the other thing is that in the draft EIS, they're projecting that 72% of their housing or their density is going to be accompanied with rental property. Rental property. This is just nonsense. When people are leaving Spokane County because they can't afford to build a house and they're going to Kootenai County, that's just a wrong outcome, and we need to change that. If we don't, we're going to end up being the one that's going to be the bedroom community to Post Falls. So yes, there are other numbers that need to be adjusted here.
Is Scott, is that information we can get from the city on where they anticipate putting 22,000 units? Their capital facilities, I assume that's accessible. What if it shows they can't meet that? What remedies or options are available out there?
Yes, the answer is yes, and we saw that in their draft EIS. We submitted comments that suggested that their EIS did not adequately support their numbers, and we were looking forward to their preferred alternative being able to do so. Their council is voting on their preferred alternative tonight. And so their documents are out and available, and we will know officially what they're going to be acting on tonight.
Okay.
If we are unable to determine through their capital facilities, transportation, usual things that their projections are realistic, we can challenge them. We have no authority to force them to change. Commerce, if anybody points out a flaw, Commerce has an obligation to review that in their 60-day review. Presumably, they would say they would not be in compliance with the Growth Management Act if they're overreaching on their options. And that would be something that we would simply point out from our perspective, saying, based on what you've shown us, we can't understand how you can support this. And as we look at these documents from today, we'll see, because we've told them this for 4 years, they said, you get to pick any number you want because that's your legal ability, but you have to show us your work. You have to demonstrate that you can in fact support the numbers you're being allocated. That's been a message from the county to all of the cities for the entire process of this comprehensive plan.
Okay. Commissioner French?
Well, and I think, shifting some of that growth potential to some of the areas that are and have demonstrated the ability to accommodate growth, I think it's a reasonable assumption for us as we adopt these final numbers and the allocations and stuff. I went through that draft environmental impact statement, and it was MAI, made as instructed. And I don't know who the chef is over at the city, but they're clearly cooking the books. And we got to do a better job of this. Otherwise, in 20 years, the county's going to be in a very, very poor situation. Thank you.
Could I ask just one last?
Back up one run. I'm sorry.
So the method prime A, I love it, sounds like a Star Trek thing. Anyway, that method, I'm thinking of the prime derivative. That method said that we were using housing share.
Yes,
Okay, so we're following what the board, I'm just going back to what we adopted. The board did adopt a methodology that said that we're
No.
gonna use housing share,
No.
but that's just how the HAP tool works.
yes, the HAP tool works with any input you want.
Okay,
When the board adopted the HAPT A prime methodology, population share was tool of the day. That was the matrix that was attached to the resolution, was based on the population allocations. Later that month, the steering committee endorsed the housing-based allocations. So when you took action based on population allocations. So
but my understanding is that Commerce had already said that the housing share was the correct methodology to use.
it was their preferred methodology and it's,
Okay,
and you know,
I don't wanna get into the whole, we we discussed that for about an hour and a half at the last growth management steering committee meeting.
yeah,
But I'm kind of still a bit confused about the timeline of what all that was going on,
Sure.
but the housing share is the recommendation because it considers like the housing inequality and those issues that need to be addressed in the plan? Or what,
yes,
why
that was
is that
considered
the,
the homeless, it was on the chart up there.
Okay,
The
like-
30% versus the 10%.
right,
those
you need
were-
to be building housing for
different.
all different income levels as well as
Yes.
accommodating homeless shelters.
Right,
Okay.
but that said, the population allocation version that was originally on the table did the same thing. Because it still had the PSH housing, the non-PHS housing, the 0 to 30, all of that. The outputs still addressed each housing need, it was just a different input. But using the housing share changed that from a pure population percentage into a modified one because it pulled out prison populations, it pulled out dormitory or hospital populations. And it added,
And it looked at
That
household size
equity-
is what you were saying. What's the household size?
yes, and that varied
Okay.
from 2.7 to 2.1,
Not every unit has the same number of people in it.
correct?
So, okay, so those things were all
Correct.
accommodated, okay.
But you know, what the point I'm just trying to reiterate kind of for the record is the population allocation that you adopted in January of 25 is perfectly legitimate. Commerce at the time said you can use any method you want. You can use our version A, you can use our version B, or you can use a method C, which is anything you can come up with and agree on. Well, PTAC could not agree on a unified methodology, which led back to A, and then A became A prime by reflecting that A was allocating more units at lower incomes into the rural areas than it should have. And so all those were zeroed out and that became A prime. But Commerce initially was fine with the population allocations. The housing ones ended up by default because that's where PTAC ultimately agreed to stay. And that's where they are today. So on this,
So can I, who was, so PTAC made that decision, who directed PTAC to do that? And who is PTAC supposed to take direction from?
I'm the steering committee. and
Did the steering
Yeah.
committee give them express
Interesting
direction to do that?
My recollection was the direction came from Commerce, that Commerce strongly preferred the use of housing allocations than population allocations. But that came, you know, a year into the process, that came well after we'd gone through the first cycle.
Okay. Commissioner French?
You know, I just want to take us back to when we first started this process several years ago, and we had, as a board, made the decision that we were going to drive this process much more than allowing the cities to do it or other entities and stuff. And so what has happened now is that our direction and our leadership has been co-opted by PTAC. And PTAC is making decisions that, you know, they have an expectation that we're going to just adopt willy-nilly. And I got a great deal of heartburn with what PTAC has done with changing the direction here and, you know, playing musical instruments with the allocation. we know how this county is growing, and we know where it needs to grow more and where it hasn't met the growth projections and stuff. This has got to be an issue of leadership. We can't default to PTAC and staff that probably the majority of have never developed anything but a headache. I mean, I apologize for being so passionate about this, but I served on the city planning commission when we were adopting that plan and had every kind of expectation, and none of it came to fruition. I just don't want to see that happening again. Thank you.
Let me wrap up our thought with the data that you can see on the screen. And there's a couple of key items here. And the biggest one is the housing unit growth number. You can see is 75,000 plus. These are these numbers on one side is the 2020 census, as the other is the 2046 target. That represents that full 26-year growth period, not the 20-year growth horizon of the plan. And so one of the things that all of the communities need to do, and I need to check specifically on Commerce's guidance on this, but we've been using this 26-year allocation for a lot of our work up to this point. We need to back out what's already happened from 2020 to 2025. That is in the books, so to speak, and say, well, this is our new growth. So that 75,000 number could drop to 60 or 55,000 in terms of actual new housing unit growth for the 20-year horizon. And if you put that in perspective and look at the growth that we had in, say, the 2015 to 2020 and 20 to 25 periods, the county could easily absorb all of 55,000 units in 10 years instead of 20 years, looking at our historic growth patterns. And again, this is where the HAP tool falls apart. And that's probably too strong. Where the HAP tool is constrained by the very conservative OFM projections. And to back that all the way back, we made the recommendation to start with the OFM median projections because that was the safest defensible thing to do at the time. The county, none of the cities have demographic experts on their staff, so we had no basis to change that other than to say this is our starting position, but it may not be our final position as we start to really balance real growth with the projections as they come out. And so that's now what we're seeing 4 years later is the growth is stronger. Now, granted, this last year it's tapered off a little bit, but it is stronger and could outgrow this very quickly. In a way, that's still all right, because if you're growing faster, you are allowed to readjust your growth patterns, particularly in this first 5-year period, but you can adjust them annually if you can defend them. And that involves sometimes the UGA swap version of it rather than the creation. But now that we're, at the, maybe not 11th hour, but 10th hour, some of these, the numbers, they're defensible on how we got here. They may not reflect today's world as accurately as we'd like, but it's important to remember one fundamental part of this kind of forecasting. It is an exercise in crystal ball gazing. We as planners can't tell people where they have to live. We can make land available, we can regulate it, we can zone it, but the market is going to build where the market can sell projects. Most important thing that's come out of this HAP tool isn't fighting over the actual number of allocated housing units. It's making sure we built in that report and modify what we started out as target reconciliation. That if something isn't working, we have a tool sanctioned by GMA to open the hood of the car and tinker with the engine in annual monitoring and in multiple year changes. So our perspective is less on the actual numbers than it is making sure we've got the ability to control for growth. As Commissioner French noted, the city has been less than transparent all along in sharing with us how they intend to support their growth, and we're looking forward to their EIS tonight to get a sense of have they documented their ability to do that. if not, then, I think we have, even though it's going to be late in the process, we have the, probably the obligation to think quickly and on our feet about how this allocation may change.
Scott, can I ask I mean, still with the population share versus housing share,
Yes.
I mean, we went round and round at the steering committee on that, and I tried to ask the representative that was there from Commerce, tried to ask the gal from the city, planning, it just kept going back to, the Commerce would like this, Commerce suggests this, Commerce you may use housing. Is there anything in writing that we received from Commerce that actually said use the housing share? Because when I tried to say, is it a shall or is it a may use that? And a lot of people like to, everybody tap dance around that at the steering committee. Nobody wanted to come out and say, yes, you must use housing share, and here's where it's in writing. It's just like, they just would say, well, that's how the tool was designed. Well, do we have to? Well, we'd like it if you did. Must we use that? It's preferred. I mean, that's what nobody would give a straight answer. Why?
I think you're accurate in recanting the meeting. That's true. I would go back to the very first introduction of HAT, where it was, here's the population allocations, plug the population in, there's your housing allocations. And you can do this A, B, or C method. So it wasn't, and C was, you don't have to use HAP, but you have to have something that you can defend under GMA. Nobody collectively could agree on what that something was. So
correct. There was an A, B, or if you could come up with C. And yeah, they reported back, we can't come up with a C. So
Liberty Lake wanted one thing, Airway Heights wanted another, the city was by itself. So there was no unanimity or no even consensus. That led us back to A. And then Commerce introduced, we would prefer you use a housing share. That's how we designed the tool, not the population share we initially directed you to use. So they I don't say they moved the goalposts. They said, we would prefer you use this share.
well, they threw in another potential option, right? Is that another way of stating that?
Yes.
But again, it was an option. It wasn't that we were required to, and we had already adopted A with population. And so, I mean, that's kind of where the hangup was at the steering committee. It was all these cities like, well, no, we use this. But again, it goes back, who told you to use that? And they're like, well, Commerce, but it's not Commerce's role to tell you which one to use, right?
Well,
Or if it is, I mean, it's like, where is that in writing?
we would,
So-
we ignore Commerce's guidance at our peril because they have to review and sign off on our comprehensive plan. They get a 60-day review before it comes back to you. But where they are directive, sure, if they say this is how you must do things, it's here in the RCW, it's here in the WAC, we go up and we do that. When it is, you may do this, or you could use this tool, there's a good reason to use that because it is coming from Commerce, and Commerce will evaluate our plan and they accept the tool. If we use the tool, they're going to accept the results. The challenge was changing the tool in the middle of the game. And it added uncertainty, it added the confusion because the population per household numbers were, in my opinion, somewhat arbitrary. And so when you've got that variance, now individual places are going up in allocation, going down in allocation. The part of the housing allocation that made sense was the group quarters part of it. We shouldn't necessarily be forcing Airway Heights to plan for population of whatever 1,500 people that are currently in a prison because they don't need housing. They're somewhere else. But that alone, it didn't necessarily justify the distinction from population to housing share by itself. Because Airway Heights could have reduced its population by the prison population. Could have said, non-populated, and it would have been just fine. So in our opinion, the population numbers are as valid as they were in January 21 or 25 when you adopted them. The housing numbers have the momentum of everybody using them.
Yeah.
But the last thing I'll add to that is even the housing numbers have to change because of this 26-year gap.
Yeah.
And so if somebody's numbers went up or down, every city, every place has to back out the first 5 years of this and look at what's going forward. So even the numbers that are out there, the actual numbers, probably are not ready for prime time.
Commissioner French?
Yeah, so Mr. Chesney touched on what some of the underlying problem is here. When the cities couldn't agree, and that's not a surprise, instead of coming to the Board of County Commissioners and getting clarity about what we were going to be supporting, they went to PTAC. And PTAC obviously has its own agenda, but it's not consistent with where the Board of County Commissioners was or wants to be when it's all said and done and stuff. So again, I suggest that it's up to the board to identify and solidify these numbers, which ones we're going to use and how we're going to use them. And when you're going back to the city of Spokane and its growth, I wanted to say, that drop in population relative to everybody else, that was after the city of Spokane initiated 3 large annexations: the South Regal, the West Plains, North Division. After 3 large annexations, they still are dropping population relative to the rest of the county. So we just need to be more diligent and forthright and have the board give the direction that we need. And then after we're done with this, I think the board needs to have a conversation about, do we need to continue the steering committee, because it's not a requirement of law, and we might want to go to a different course, but that's for a different day. Thank you.
Well, could I just have one, or do you have something?
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, I think we're
At the
coming down to the end of the slides, if we want to see that, and then should we finish up the slides and then we'll ask kind of
All we've got
our
is a
finish up?
calendar up there.
Okay.
And you just put it up for viewing, but we don't have to comment on it.
All right. Well, let's.
Well, I was just gonna say though, it sounds like the county, you keep saying PTAC, but we are part of PTAC, and the county was planning with housing share for what everybody agreed to for the last 1.5 years, right?
We were at the same time challenging other PTAC to defend the differences, and that took a year. We tried, Commerce finally sent us an unlocked version of HAPT, and we could see what was going on. The city worked more closely with Commerce than we initially understood, and they were involved in writing the population per household numbers that we didn't see until very late in the game. So the county was, if not actively challenging it, we were continually testing. It's like, why is this sheet not being consistent with the first round of planning? But yes, we did ultimately go along with that because we're getting late in the game, and as I laid out, it's a crystal ball exercise.
Right.
We can adopt these numbers, we can adopt the population numbers and see how that affects things. But as long as we can monitor and reconcile these after the fact, the county has the tool it really needs. And knowing that, as we look at our own EIS, we will be putting together an analysis that shows here's the bookends. Here's what you get by the most reasonable infill development using the zoning, using the HAP tool. Here's what happens if that number goes not just from 17 to 22,000, but if it goes to 25,000 for some reason. How do we accommodate that so that we can share with you the ability to see that in advance and not have to react to that badly, 3 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're a huge, large, urban, growing county, And on the west side, it sounds like they've been doing this reconciliation where they actually look at real data every year, if not,
It's a
every 5
constant
years.
process, right?
And then they go, okay, where's the growth happening that we didn't expect, or where is it not happening?
We adjust.
And then we adjust. And I just think we have to do that. We need to come up with a
There is.
agreement with all the communities here that is, cause that's using real-time information instead of, I understand why we have to use a crystal ball to start, but then we need real numbers to be continuously adjusting. So I hope we can come back with and actually put together that agreement.
I would say there's at least a building consensus among the planning staff that it's time for Spokane County to get into the buildable lands process. And that's something that, yes, we want to be talking about. First off, we need to finish our plans under the rules we've got.
Yes.
But, as we set these up for review, and that really is the Friday after Labor Day, just for everybody's kind of benchmarking progress. This has to be essentially done in its final draft form. From that point on, we can be working with the legislature if we agree to get a bill sponsored that puts us into the buildable lands program. Because it is a legislative initiative. We can do it on our own, but it doesn't carry the same weight. And I believe that the cities would be supportive of that because it gets at exactly this review, monitor, report that we're putting into the countywide planning policies, a hearing with the steering committee in June. That's the first step in monitoring every year. How are we doing? How are we getting to our doing this? And I will put one thing back on the table that we said in March or May of 2021. We put together a matrix of growth, 20-year horizon for everybody. And for the cities, we did it by neighborhood. And we put that out there and said, here, this is the foundational tool that we think we should have going into this comp plan update. Nobody wanted to participate in that. And it was astonishing to me that city planners would look at this tool and go, I don't care how these neighborhoods developed over 20 years. Number means nothing to me. Here's what we want to do. And we can't do any of this until we get further down the road. So there's a look at the growth that we could have started with that buildable lands approach. We could have had a 20-year horizon, how every neighborhood in the city of the valley and the city grow, stayed stable, diminished. To me, that would be an incredibly powerful planning tool. How did Emerson Garfield fare? What's going on in West Central? The city's plan anticipates the entire eastern third of West Central as high density residential. It's already zoned that way. Well, what's that 20-year horizon show? Did you get there? Did you not get there? So we tried to build that tool early on, and now we're going back to it because this housing allocation still is somewhat ambiguous. And yes, I'm sorry, I've used up my time, but
So can I ask, when we get the city of Spokane, when we find out what their action is tonight? What does that clear up as far as the picture goes? Once we know what they do tonight, what will that allow us to then do moving forward? Is that sort of an additional piece to
illumination
the
will be
puzzle?
there.
Yeah,
We're already programming the June 1st session with the board to be focused on EIS, urban growth area, and the alternatives for growth.
okay,
We will have a very detailed, very hard look at the city's EIS by then, and we'll be able to factor that into our conversation with you.
okay,
And so that will be a parallel path to, there's the HAP tool itself. This will be based entirely on evaluating their EIS using the HAP tool as well as ours. So I would say the June 1st session is going to be a very productive time.
okay. And the GMA steering committee meeting was canceled for this Wednesday, right?
Yes, it was.
Okay,
And that would be if we wanted to, and this would be part of your guidance, if you wanted us to bring the HAP tool to the steering committee for a public hearing, we need to do that. We need to notice it next week for the June 17th meeting. And the challenge, there's something I need to check with Commerce too, because part of the countywide planning policies was to make sure we had a methodology for HAPT. If Commerce is saying they want an adopted allocation by jurisdiction, by income band, an actual number in each of those, there hasn't been a formal public hearing for that tool for that level of detail. The HAPT tool has been talked about in 25 different meetings that are all public, so it's had plenty of exposure. But if Commerce needs it adopted in a different way than we anticipate, we would have to hold a public hearing for that, and the steering committee would be the place to do it. So we could tee that up for the 17th. And the alternative is to reflect that you did adopt the methodology with the population-based allocations attached to it in January. That held a public hearing before it was adopted in that sense. So there's one tool that's already out there. To go back to that would be disruptive to the communities. And that's what Airway Heights has threatened to make the county pay for additional costs to do all that sort of thing. So they clearly want to stay the course and adopt the HAPT as a housing tool. But from like I said, from our perspective, Commerce found them both valid. We can work with any of them because we have a chance to monitor and fix them in real time.
I think we need some legal advice on steps on that, but it sounds like you need to get with Commerce, figure out what is actually required.
We need to clarify. There's been so much, so many meetings where it's been, you can do this, you should do this, we prefer this, but you could do this. Yeah, I can't tell you definitively today.
Well, to the topic of us being able to shift a certain, several thousand units from non-UGA unincorporated to UGA.
Yes.
We have that in writing from Commerce.
Yes, we do.
That is in writing. Okay, okay.
And that would be going to the steering committee in June, because that number has never been discussed.
Okay. I mean, based on what I'm hearing and when I've talked to other folks and stakeholders, it seems if we're able to do that, the only heartburn seems to be around the large number of housing share that goes to the city of Spokane, and if they can actually hit that number. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, that seems to be what I'm hearing. All the other cities are pretty close, whether it's population versus housing, closer. It just seems our rural versus UGA is what's out of whack. And several folks think the city's number is too large based on their historic growth. So is there a way to reconcile both of those things? I mean, it sounds like Commerce has given us the tool to fix our non-UGA versus UGA number.
Yes.
What about the city's number?
And that's I think.
I guess we'll know more tonight.
The tool in the next 2 weeks
Okay.
to say, yes, they can document this and we can stand by it, or no, they still haven't documented it and we need to challenge it.
All right.
But at the steering committee meeting, wasn't there a motion made to have a hearing on the allocation
There was.
table? Okay.
There was that.
And a hearing on the home ownership.
Right, on the planning policies.
The home ownership, the monitor and report, both as countywide planning policies and the HAPT. The HAPT none of them could be noticed for May 20th because we'd already passed the deadlines. So that's why the May meeting was canceled and everything was pushed to June. There will be a public hearing, at least on the HAPT tool numbers for the county, because nobody has seen what that number looks like. The county was just given the green light by Commerce to make the adjustment using a methodology that we can defend. So we would be bringing that to the steering committee. So they would have a chance to consider the entire HAPT tool. Yeah, or at that time, they could go back and say, you know what, the population tool that we looked at in January of 25 is fine and everybody needs to use it. Either way, there's clarity that the cities can't cause or can't accuse the county of delay. But it, just bear in mind, and all that being said, the cities will have some burden to go back and adjust the work that they have done to date to reflect those changes. And that will, even if they're minor changes, it'll require some work. And in the city of Spokane's case, if the HAPT methodology is not adopted, they may have to redo their EIS, which will certainly push them over the deadline for December adoption. Now, that said, that's a consequence of can they defend the number they put on the table?
Okay. All right, well, I think we beat this up today. Thank you, Scott. Okay.
I think that's a good idea.
No executive session.
Okay. All right, are there any miscellaneous items for today?
Mr. Vice Chair.
Yes, Commissioner
We're
French.
gonna have a quorum issue. As I indicated earlier,
I know.
I had a hard stop at noon.
Yeah.
I've got a group that's touring projects and I'm supposed to be part of that group. I'm gonna have to take an Uber to catch up to them. So, but I've got to stop, I've got to step off. I can't
Understood.
miss any more of this this trip.
Nope, you got it. Thank you for zooming in. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Well, then that will do it for today. It is 12:23 and we are adjourned. See everybody back tomorrow.